In the fog-choked streets of 1890s London, a cryptic letter slips under Sherlock Holmes' door at 221B Baker Street, whispering of a spectral figure, the Forgotten Herald, haunting the derelict Heralds' Rest Tavern. Is it a ghost foretelling doom, or a cunning ruse hiding a darker truth? As eerie wails echo through Whitechapel and ancient symbols hint at a lost guild's secrets, Holmes and Watson unravel a chilling mystery. From a vanished expedition on a windswept Scottish isle to a hidden vault beneath the Thames, they chase a legendary artifact, the Herald's compass, and a glowing crystal that bends minds. Who is the cloaked figure stalking their every move? What power lies in the Starstone, and why does it drive men to madness? Join Holmes as he navigates a labyrinth of deception, where every clue raises new questions, and the line between truth and illusion blurs in this thrilling tale of suspense, greed, and hidden legacies. Chapter 1. The Whisper in the Fog. The fog rolled thick over London, a creeping shroud that muffled the clatter of hooves and the cries of street vendors. It was November 1892, and the city seemed to hold its breath, as if wary of what lurked in the Grey Veil. At 221B Baker Street, Sherlock Holmes sat by the fire, his long fingers steepled, his sharp gray eyes fixed on the flickering flames. The room was warm, the air heavy with the scent of tobacco and Mrs. Hudson's freshly baked scones. But Holmes' mind was elsewhere, restless, craving a puzzle to unravel. Dr. John Watson, seated across from him, turned a page in his newspaper, the rustle breaking the silence. "Another quiet evening, Holmes," he remarked, glancing over the rim of his spectacles. "No clients, no mysteries. Perhaps London's criminals have taken a holiday." Holmes' lips twitched, a faint smirk. "Criminals, my dear Watson, are as predictable as the tides. They do not take holidays. They merely wait for the opportune moment to strike." He leaned back, exhaling a plume of smoke from his pipe. "But you are correct. The city is unusually still. I confess it vexes me." As if in answer to his words, a sharp rap came at the door. Watson started, but Holmes' eyes gleamed with sudden interest. Mrs. Hudson bustled in, her face flushed. "From the cold." "A letter, Mr. Holmes," she said, holding out a cream-colored envelope. "Slipped under the front door, it was. No messenger, no name. Peculiar, if you ask me." Holmes took the envelope, his fingers brushing the paper with the precision of a surgeon. "Peculiar indeed," he murmured, noting the absence of a postmark. The wax seal bore no crest, only a crude impression of a compass rose. He broke it open, unfolding a single sheet of parchment. The script was elegant, almost antiquated, written in black ink that shimmered faintly in the firelight. "Read it aloud." "Watson," Holmes said, passing the letter to his friend. "Let us hear what mystery seeks us out tonight." Watson adjusted his spectacles and cleared his throat. "To Mr. Sherlock Holmes," he began. "If you value reason over superstition, come to the Herald's Rest Tavern in Whitechapel at midnight. The Forgotten Herald walks its halls, a specter of doom to those who see it. Uncover its truth, or let London tremble. Yours in shadow, a friend." Holmes chuckled, a low, dry sound, a theatrical flourish. "The writer fancies themselves a poet of mystery. What do you make of it, Watson?" Watson frowned, setting the letter on the table. "Sounds like a ghost story to frighten children. Whitechapel's full of such tales, especially around old taverns. Likely a prank or some poor soul's delusion." "Perhaps," Holmes said. rising and crossing to the window. He peered into the fog, his silhouette sharp against the dim glow of gaslights. "But the paper is expensive, the ink rare Indian, if I'm not mistaken, with a hint of indigo. No common prankster would bother with such details. And the phrase Forgotten Herald, it has a specificity that intrigues me. No, Watson, this is no mere jest. We shall visit this tavern." Watson sighed, folding his newspaper. "I suppose sleep can wait. But a ghost, Holmes? Surely you don't believe in such nonsense." Holmes' eyes glinted with amusement. "I believe in what can be observed, deduced, and proven. If this herald is a spectre, I shall expose it as a trick of light or a charlatan's ruse. If it is something more, well, that would be a novelty worth investigating. Fetch your coat, Watson. We have an appointment with the supernatural." The streets of Whitechapel were a labyrinth of shadow and sound, the fog weaving through narrow alleys like a living thing. Holmes moved with purpose, his long strides forcing Watson to hurry to keep pace. The gaslights flickered, casting eerie halos that did little to pierce the gloom. The Herald's Rest Tavern loomed ahead, its weathered sign barely legible, a faded crest of a herald blowing a horn, the paint peeling like skin from a corpse. The tavern was abandoned, its windows boarded, its door hanging ajar. The air carried the sour tang of stale ale and decay. Holmes paused at the threshold, his keen senses scanning the darkness. "Observe, Watson," he said softly. "No footprints in the dust outside, yet the door is unlatched. Someone has been here recently, and they were careful." Watson gripped his revolver, his breath visible in the cold. "Careful or not, I don't like the look of this place. It feels watched." Holmes stepped inside, his lantern casting a golden glow across the interior. The tavern was a ruin, tables overturned, chairs splintered, the bar coated in grime. Cobwebs draped the rafters like funeral shrouds. But what caught Holmes' eye were the walls, etched with strange symbols, spirals, stars, and compass roses carved with precision into the rotting wood. "Curious," Holmes murmured, running a finger along the carving. "These are not the scrawls of vandals. They resemble navigational marks, perhaps from an old guild. Note the repetition of the compass rose identical to the seal on our letter." Watson peered over his shoulder, his unease growing. "A guild? In a place like this? What would they be doing in Whitechapel?" "Precisely the question," Holmes replied, his voice low. He moved to the bar, his lantern illuminating a trapdoor in the floor, its edges worn but free of dust. "Someone has used this recently. Shall we descend?" Before Watson could protest, a low wail echoed through the tavern, a sound like wind through a broken flute. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, rising and falling in a mournful cadence. Watson's hand tightened on his revolver, his heart pounding. "Holmes, what the devil was that?" Holmes stood still, his head tilted, listening. The wail came again, fainter now, but no less unsettling. "Fascinating," he said, his tone clinical. "Not a human voice, nor an animal. Observe the acoustics. Watson, the sound resonates as if amplified by the walls themselves. A clever design, perhaps a hidden resonator or pipe. A ghost that uses plumbing," Watson said, attempting levity but failing to mask his discomfort. Holmes smirked. "No ghost, Watson. A trick, and a good one. Someone wishes us to believe in the supernatural, but I suspect a more earthly motive. Let us explore this trapdoor." He knelt, prying open the trapdoor with a creak. A narrow staircase descended into darkness, the air below damp and heavy with the scent of earth. Holmes led the way, his lantern casting long shadows that danced like specters. Watson followed, his revolver at the ready, though he felt foolish. Aiming at shadows, the cellar was small, its stone walls slick with moisture. Barrels, long-rotted, lined the edges, but in the center stood a crude altar of stacked crates, draped with a tattered cloth. On it lay a single object, a brass compass, its needle spinning wildly despite no apparent magnetic interference. The same symbols from the walls were etched into its surface, glowing faintly in the lantern's light. Holmes picked up the compass, turning it in his hands. "Exquisite craftsmanship," he said. "This is no ordinary navigational tool. The needle's behavior suggests an external influence, perhaps a mineral or device hidden nearby." As he spoke, the wail sounded again, louder, closer, seeming to emanate from the walls. Watson spun, his revolver raised, but saw nothing but shadows. "Holmes, we're not alone down here." Holmes' eyes narrowed, scanning the cellar. "Indeed not," he said, stepping toward a corner where the shadows seemed thicker. He tapped the wall, and a hollow echo answered. With a swift motion, he pressed a loose stone, and a panel slid open, revealing a narrow passage. The wail stopped abruptly, as if startled by the discovery. "After you, Watson," Holmes said, his voice calm but edged with excitement. Watson hesitated, then stepped into the passage, the lantern's light barely piercing the gloom. The tunnel was tight, its walls rough-hewn, smelling of salt and decay. It sloped downward, leading deeper beneath the city. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged into a larger chamber, its ceiling supported by ancient beams. In the center stood a wooden table, strewn with papers, maps, letters, and diagrams, all bearing the compass rose symbol. Holmes pounced on the papers, his fingers flying as he scanned them. "These are records of the Order of the Saffron Veil," he said, "a guild of cartographers and explorers disbanded in the 1840s after a scandal. This chamber was likely their secret meeting place." Watson picked up a map, its edges brittle. "What scandal? And what does this have to do with our ghost?" Holmes held up a letter, its script matching the one delivered to Baker Street. The Order was accused of stealing artifacts during their expeditions. This letter mentions a herald's compass, said to point not to north, but to hidden truths. It seems our Forgotten Herald is tied to this artifact, and someone is desperate to keep its secrets buried. A sudden noise, a scuffle of boots came from the tunnel. Holmes doused the lantern, plunging them into darkness. Watson's heart raced as he heard footsteps approaching, then retreating, fading into silence. When Holmes relit the lantern, the chamber was empty, but a single sheet of paper lay on the floor, freshly dropped. It bore a single line in the same elegant script: "The Herald sees all." Holmes' eyes gleamed with determination. "Our quarry is close, Watson, and they are watching. This is no ghost, but a living soul with much to hide. We shall return to Baker Street, study these papers, and prepare for the next move in this game." They retraced their steps, emerging into the fog-laden night. The tavern seemed less menacing now, its secrets partially unveiled. As they hailed a hansom cab, Watson glanced back, half expecting to see a spectral figure in the mist. But there was only the fog, curling around the Herald's rest like a shroud. Back at Baker Street, Holmes spread the papers across the table, his mind already piecing together the puzzle. "The Order of the Saffron Veil," he said, lighting his pipe. "Their secrets are the key. Tomorrow we visit the British Museum. If my suspicions are correct, their archives will reveal the Herald's true nature and the motive behind this charade." Watson sank into his chair, the compass heavy in his pocket. "And if it is a ghost?" he asked, half in jest. Holmes' smile was sharp as a blade. "Then, Watson, I shall deduce its spectral motives and banish it with logic. But mark my words, the Forgotten Herald is flesh and blood, and I shall unmask them." The fire crackled, casting shadows on the walls, and outside the fog pressed close, as if guarding the secrets yet to be uncovered. Holmes leaned back, his eyes alight with the thrill of the chase, and Watson knew sleep would be scarce until the mystery was solved. Chapter 2. The Guild's Lost Ledger. The fog clung to London like a persistent fever, its tendrils curling around the gas lamps that flickered weakly along Baker Street. Inside the warm, cluttered sanctuary of 221B, Sherlock Holmes sat cross-legged. In his armchair, the mysterious letter from the previous evening held delicately between his fingers. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting long shadows across the room where Dr. John Watson stood by the window, peering into the gloom as though expecting the spectral Forgotten Herald to materialize from the mist itself. Holmes's eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the letter for the third time, his lips pursed in thought. The script was exquisite, almost calligraphic, yet it bore no signature, no crest. No hint of its origin save for the faint scent of lavender and ink that lingered on the paper. The words spoke of the Herald's Rest Tavern in Whitechapel, a place now abandoned, where a ghostly figure was said to appear, its wail a harbinger of doom. Holmes had dismissed the supernatural outright, his mind already dissecting the problem as a puzzle of human design. "Watson," he said abruptly, breaking the silence, "what do you make of this tavern business?" "A ghost, they claim, yet ghosts do not slip letters under doors nor etch symbols on walls. This is no spectral affair, but a calculated deception. The question is, to what end?" Watson turned from the window, his face a mixture of curiosity and unease. "It's peculiar, Holmes. Whitechapel is hardly a place for genteel hauntings. The tavern's been shuttered for years, hasn't it? Why would anyone go to such lengths to create a ghost story there?" "Precisely," Holmes replied, rising swiftly and tossing the letter onto the table. "The location is significant. Whitechapel is a labyrinth of secrets, a place where the desperate and the cunning converge. The tavern itself may hold the key. We shall visit it tonight, but first I require information. Mrs. Hudson." The landlady appeared at the door, her expression one of mild exasperation tempered by affection. "Yes, Mr. Holmes." "A pot of tea, if you please, and the morning's papers, all of them, including the less reputable ones. There's something afoot, and the press, however sensational, may have caught wind of it." As Mrs. Hudson bustled off, Watson settled into a chair, his notebook open. "You suspect the newspapers will mention this Herald's Rest?" "Not directly," Holmes said, pacing now, his dressing gown trailing behind him like a cape. "But there may be whispers reports of strange occurrences, missing persons, or unusual activity in Whitechapel. The letter's author wants us to investigate, Watson. They've laid a trail, and I intend to follow it. By dusk, the two men were navigating the narrow, cobbled streets of Whitechapel, the fog thicker here, carrying the mingled scents of coal smoke, gin, and despair. The Herald's Rest stood at the end of a desolate alley, its signboard long faded, the windows boarded up like the eyes of a corpse. Holmes's lantern cast a pale glow as he examined the door, which hung slightly ajar, its lock broken. "Careful, Watson," Holmes murmured, pushing the door open with the tip of his cane. "We are not alone in our curiosity." Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the dust of neglect. The tavern's interior was a skeleton of its former self, tables overturned, chairs splintered, and the bar counter scarred with knife marks. Holmes moved with purpose, his eyes darting from floor to ceiling, noting every detail. Watson followed, his hand resting on the revolver in his coat pocket, the memory of the chilling wail from the letter still vivid. Holmes paused at the far wall, where faint etchings caught the lantern's light. He traced them with a gloved finger, revealing a series of symbols, a compass rose, a crescent moon, and a curious sigil resembling a flame within a circle. "These are not random," he said. "They belong to a guild, an old one, if I'm not mistaken. The Order of the Saffron Veil, perhaps." Watson frowned. "A guild? In Whitechapel?" "Once," Holmes replied, his voice low. "They were cartographers, explorers, and, if rumors are to be believed, seekers of esoteric knowledge. Dissolved decades ago under mysterious circumstances. These symbols suggest their presence lingered here." As if in response, a low, mournful wail echoed through the tavern, rising and falling like a distant siren. Watson started, his grip tightening on the revolver. But Holmes remained still, his head tilted as though listening to a symphony. The sound faded, leaving only the creak of the building and the distant clatter of hooves outside. "Fascinating," Holmes said, a spark of amusement in his eyes. "An acoustic trick, Watson. Likely a concealed bellows or a resonating chamber, designed to mimic a spectral cry. Our ghost is a man-made construct." Watson's unease lingered. "But why go to such trouble? To scare off vagrants? Or to protect something?" Holmes said, his gaze returning to the symbols. This tavern was no mere drinking hole. It was a meeting place, a sanctuary for the guild. Whatever they hid here, someone wishes it to remain hidden. They spent another hour searching the tavern, finding little else but cobwebs and broken glass. Holmes pocketed a fragment of plaster bearing the flame sigil, his mind already racing ahead. As they stepped back into the alley, a figure darted from the shadows, cloaked and swift, vanishing into the fog before Watson could pursue. "Holmes!" Watson called, but the detective was already kneeling, examining a scrap of paper left where the figure had stood. It bore a single line in the same elegant script as the letter. "The Herald sees all." Holmes's lips curled into a faint smile. "Our orchestrator grows bold. Come, Watson. The British Museum awaits us tomorrow. If the Order of the Saffron Veil left traces, that is where we shall find them." The following morning, the museum's vast halls echoed with the footsteps of scholars and the curious. Holmes, dressed in a nondescript suit to avoid attention, led Watson to the reading room, where he requested access to the archives of obscure societies. The librarian, a doorman with spectacles perched precariously on his nose, produced a dusty volume bound in cracked leather. It was a partial ledger of the Order of the Saffron Veil, its pages brittle and yellowed. Holmes's fingers moved swiftly, turning pages with the precision of a surgeon. "Here," he said at last, pointing to an entry dated 1847, "the Guild's final expedition to a remote isle off the Scottish coast, Dunmach. They sought an artifact, the Herald's compass, rumored to point not to magnetic north, but to hidden truths. The expedition vanished, and the Guild dissolved shortly after." Watson leaned closer, reading over Holmes's shoulder. "Hidden truths? Sounds like a fanciful tale." "Perhaps," Holmes said, "but every tale has a kernel of fact. The compass may be a device, a map, or even a metaphor, but its loss was significant enough to fracture the Guild. And these symbols—" He tapped the ledger, where the same flame sigil appeared in the margins. "They mark the expedition's purpose. Something was stolen or lost, and someone wishes it to remain so." As they left the museum, Watson noticed a cloaked figure lingering near the entrance, their face obscured by a scarf. Holmes, too, saw them, but made no move to pursue. "Let them follow," he said quietly. "They will reveal themselves in time." Back at Baker Street, Holmes spread the ledger's pages across his desk, cross-referencing them with maps and nautical charts. The Isle of Dunmach emerged as their next destination, a rocky outcrop battered by the North Sea, its cliffs home to legends of ghosts and shipwrecks. Watson, ever practical, packed their bags, though his mind lingered on the cloaked figure and the cryptic note. That evening, as they boarded a train bound for Scotland, the fog seemed to follow them, curling around the platform like a living thing. Holmes sat by the window, the note, the Herald seas all tucked into his pocket. His eyes gleamed with the thrill of the chase, but Watson felt a chill that had little to do with the weather. The train's whistle pierced the night, carrying them toward Dunmach and the secrets of the Forgotten Herald. The journey north was long, the train rattling through darkened countryside as rain lashed the windows. Holmes remained silent, his mind a whirl of deductions, while Watson dozed fitfully, dreaming of spectral figures and hidden compasses. By dawn, they reached a coastal village where a fisherman agreed to ferry them to Dunmach for a steep price. The sea was rough, the boat pitching against waves that seemed to warn them away. But Holmes's resolve was unshakable. Dunmach rose from the mist like a forgotten fortress, its cliffs jagged and unyielding. The fisherman dropped them at a rocky shore, refusing to linger. "Mind the ghosts," he muttered before rowing back to the mainland. Watson shivered, but Holmes was already striding toward the cliffs, his coat flapping in the wind. The island was desolate, its only inhabitants gulls and the relentless wind. Holmes led them to the ruins of an ancient observatory, its dome cracked but still standing. Inside, the air was damp, the floor littered with broken instruments. Holmes's lantern revealed more symbols etched into the stone compass roses, moons, and the omnipresent flame. "The Guild was here," he said, his voice echoing. This was their outpost, a place to study the stars. Watson noticed fresh footprints in the dust, too precise to be those of a casual wanderer. "Holmes, these are recent." "Someone's been here." "Indeed," Holmes replied, kneeling to examine them. "Boots, London made, size 9. Our herald is no phantom but a man of means, traveling between city and isle." As night fell, a storm rolled in, the wind howling like the wail from the tavern. Holmes and Watson took shelter in the observatory, their lantern casting eerie shadows. Watson, peering through a broken window, glimpsed a figure in the fog, a cloaked silhouette that vanished when he blinked. "Holmes, I saw it. The Herald." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "A trick of the light or a deliberate one? Stay vigilant, Watson." By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the island sodden but eerily silent. Holmes discovered a hidden chamber beneath the observatory floor, its entrance concealed by a flagstone. Inside, they found maps marked with celestial alignments, their lines converging on a smuggler's cove on the island's western shore. "This is where we'll find answers," Holmes said, folding the maps carefully. "The Herald's compass, whatever it may be, is tied to this place." As they made their way to the cove, Watson couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The fog seemed to pulse with secrets and the weight of the cryptic note. "The Herald" sees all pressed heavily on his mind. Holmes, however, was undeterred. His every step purposeful, his mind a steel trap closing around the mystery. The cove awaited, and with it, the next piece of the puzzle that would unravel the enigma of the Forgotten Herald. The cove was a jagged scar in the coastline, its entrance guarded by rocks that jutted like teeth from the sea. Holmes moved with the agility of a cat, navigating the slippery stones to a cave hidden behind a curtain of seaweed. Inside, the air was damp and briny, the walls slick with moss. Holmes's lantern illuminated a smuggler's cash crates of supplies, a lantern still warm, and a bundle of papers tied with twine. Holmes untied the bundle, revealing coded messages, written in a cipher that matched the guild's symbols. "A celestial cipher," he murmured, his fingers tracing the patterns, based on the constellations marked in the observatory. The guild was nothing if not thorough. For hours, Holmes worked, his mind a whirlwind of calculations as he deciphered the messages. Watson stood guard, his revolver at the ready, the memory of the cloaked figure fresh in his mind. At last, Holmes looked up, his eyes alight with triumph. "The messages point to a London antiquarian, Mortimer Greaves. He was a member of the guild, disgraced and exiled for stealing the Heralds. Compass. He's in London, Watson, and he's the key to this charade." They returned to the mainland under a sky bruised with clouds, the fisherman's warnings ringing in Watson's ears. Back in London, they tracked Greaves to a cluttered shop in Spitalfields, its windows filled with curios and dusty tomes. Greaves was a wiry man with nervous eyes, his hands trembling as Holmes questioned him about the guild and the compass. "I know nothing of ghosts," Greaves snapped, but when Holmes pressed him about the Herald's rest, he bolted, knocking over a shelf of artifacts in his haste. Holmes gave chase, but Greaves vanished into the crowded streets. In the shop, Holmes found a hidden panel behind a bookcase, revealing a map to a forgotten crypt beneath St. Paul's Cathedral. "The guild's final secret," Holmes said, his voice low with anticipation. "Greaves is no mastermind, Watson. He's a pawn, protecting something or someone far greater." As they prepared to descend into the crypt, the air grew thick with the weight of the unknown. Holmes's mind was a beacon in the fog, but Watson felt the shadows closing in. The Herald's warning echoing in his thoughts, the crypt awaited. And with it, the truth of the Forgotten Herald's ghostly ruse. The descent into the crypt was a plunge into darkness, the air cold and heavy with the scent of earth and stone. Holmes's lantern cast flickering shadows on the walls, where more symbols glowed faintly, as though etched by an unseen hand. Watson's heart pounded, the weight of the revolver in his pocket a small comfort against the oppressive silence. The crypt's heart, they found an altar, its surface inscribed with the guild sigils. A hooded figure emerged from the shadows, its voice low and resonant. "You tread on sacred ground, Mr. Holmes. Abandon this quest or face the Herald's wrath." Watson raised his revolver, but Holmes stayed his hand. "A fine performance," Holmes said, his tone dry. "But I deal in facts, not phantoms. Reveal yourself." The figure lunged, a blade glinting in the lantern light. Holmes sidestepped, and in the scuffle, the hood fell, revealing a scarred face that vanished into the darkness before Watson could fire. On the altar, they found a fragment of the Herald's compass, a brass disc etched with stars, pulsing faintly with an eerie light. Back at Baker Street, Holmes examined the fragment, his microscope revealing traces of a rare mineral, starstone. He said, his voice tinged with awe, "Mined in Cornwall, used by the guild for reasons unknown. This compass is no mere tool, Watson. It's a key to something extraordinary." As they planned their journey to the Cornish mine, Watson couldn't shake the image of the hooded figure, the herald's warning ringing in his ears. Holmes, however, was relentless, his mind fixed on the truth. The mine awaited, and with it, the next chapter in their pursuit of the Forgotten Herald's secrets. Chapter 3. Shadows on the Isle. Train to Scotland rattled through the night, its rhythm a steady counterpoint to the restless thoughts swirling in Dr. John Watson's mind. The cryptic note, "The Herald sees all," lay folded in his coat pocket, its weight disproportionate to its size. Beside him, Sherlock Holmes sat in silence, his sharp profile illuminated intermittently by the gas lamps of passing stations. His eyes, half-lidded, betrayed the frenetic activity of his mind, piecing together the puzzle of the Forgotten Herald. Watson, though accustomed to Holmes' methods, felt a prickle of unease. The mystery of the Herald's Rest Tavern, with its eerie wail and guild symbols, had already defied his expectations. Now, as they hurtled toward the remote Isle of Dunmach, he wondered what new enigmas awaited. The journey had begun at King's Cross, where Holmes had secured a private compartment with his usual efficiency. Watson had watched him pore over the partial ledger from the British Museum, its brittle pages detailing the Order of the Saffron Veil's doomed expedition. The guild, once renowned for its cartographic precision, had vanished into obscurity after a venture to Dunmach in 1847. The ledger mentioned a herald's compass, an artifact rumored to reveal hidden truths. Holmes had dismissed the supernatural claims but fixated on the guild's dissolution and the stolen compass. A theft of such significance, he had mused, suggests a motive beyond mere greed. We are dealing with a secret someone is desperate to keep buried. As the train crossed the border into Scotland, the landscape grew wilder, the rolling hills giving way to jagged cliffs and moors shrouded in mist. Watson, lulled by the train's motion, drifted into a fitful doze, only to be roused by Holmes' sharp nudge. "We're nearing Dunmach Station," Holmes said, his voice low but urgent. "Prepare yourself, Watson. The Isle is not known for its hospitality." They disembarked at a desolate platform, the wind carrying the tang of salt and peat. Dunmach Station was little more than a weathered shack, its single lamplight flickering against the encroaching fog. A grizzled ferryman, Angus Macri, awaited them, his boat bobbing at a rickety pier. His weathered face betrayed no curiosity about their purpose, though his eyes lingered on Holmes' city attire. "You're heading to the Isle, then?" he asked, his brogue thick. "Mind the cliffs. Folk say the Herald walks there, and none who see him return unchanged." Holmes raised an eyebrow but said nothing, stepping into the boat with practiced ease. Watson followed, clutching his medical bag, the weight of his revolver inside offering. Scant comfort. The crossing was rough, the sea churning beneath a sky heavy with clouds. Macri spoke little, save to warn of the isle's treacherous paths. "Stay clear, O the old observatory," he muttered. "'Tis cursed, they say, since the guild came and went." The Isle of Dunmach emerged from the fog like a spectre itself, its cliffs rising sheer from the frothing waves. A scattering of stone cottages clung to the slopes, their windows dark. The ferryman pointed them toward a narrow path leading to the village of Dunmach, a cluster of low buildings huddled against the wind. Holmes, undeterred by the bleakness, strode forward, his coat flapping like a raven's wings. Watson hurried to keep pace, his boots sinking into the muddy trail dotting the village. They found lodgings at the only inn, a squat building called the Selkie's Rest. The innkeeper, a wiry woman named Mirag, eyed them with suspicion but provided a room with 2 narrow beds and a peat fire. Over a meager supper of mutton stew, she recounted tales of the Forgotten Herald, a cloaked figure seen on the cliffs, its wail heralding misfortune. "Last saw him a fortnight ago," she said, her voice hushed. A fisherman, Ian, claimed he saw the herald by the observatory. Next day, his boat was found splintered on the rocks. Holmes leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "This observatory, where is it located, and what is its history?" Mirag hesitated, then described a ruined structure atop the highest cliff. "Built centuries ago by an eccentric astronomer. The guild had used it as a base during their expedition, but it had been abandoned since their disappearance. Folk avoid it," she added. "Strange lights flicker there at night." Holmes thanked her and retired to their room, where he spread the ledger's pages on a rickety table. Watson, nursing a glass of whiskey, watched as Holmes traced the guild's final entries. "The observatory is our next step," Holmes declared. "The guild's work centered there, and if this herald is indeed a fabrication, the clues will be physical, not spectral." At dawn, they set out for the observatory, the path winding through gorse and heather. The wind howled, carrying the distant crash of waves. Watson gripped his hat, his thoughts drifting to the cloaked figure that had shadowed them in London. Was it the same entity locals feared? Holmes, as if reading his mind, remarked, "The note's author knew we would come here. They are either luring us or warning us. Either way, they are close." The observatory loomed ahead, a crumbling stone tower perched precariously on the cliff's edge. Its dome, half collapsed, gaped like a wound against the gray sky. Inside, the air was damp and heavy with the scent of mildew. Broken instruments, sextants, telescopes, and star charts littered the floor, coated in dust. Holmes moved with purpose, his lantern casting long shadows. He paused at a wall etched with the same guild symbols they'd seen in the Herald's Rest, a compass rose encircled by a saffron veil. "These markings are recent," Holmes said, running a finger along the grooves. "The edges are sharp, the stone unweathered. Someone has been here, Watson, and not long ago." As Holmes examined the symbols, Watson wandered to a spiral staircase descending into darkness. A faint draft rose from below, carrying a low hum, almost imperceptible. "Holmes." He called, "There's something down here." Holmes joined him, and they descended into a hidden chamber, its walls lined with shelves of moldering books and maps. At the center stood a stone table. its surface carved with a celestial map, a starfield aligned to an unfamiliar constellation. Holmes traced the lines, his brow furrowed. "This is no ordinary star chart," he said. The guild was mapping something beyond navigation, perhaps the Herald's compass itself. Watson noticed a faint scuff mark on the floor, leading to a loose flagstone. He pried it up, revealing a small cache of paper's letters written in the same elegant script as the note from Baker Street. Before Holmes could examine them, a gust of wind tore through the chamber, extinguishing their lantern. In the sudden darkness, Watson heard his soft-tread footsteps, deliberate and close. His hand went to his revolver, but Holmes' grip on. His arm stayed him. "Steady, Watson," Holmes whispered. "We are not alone." The footsteps retreated, and Holmes relit the lantern. The papers were gone, snatched from the cache. Holmes' expression was grim but unsurprised. "Our quarry is bold," he said. "They know this place well." Outside, the sky had darkened, a storm brewing over the sea. Holmes knelt to examine the ground near the observatory's entrance, his fingers brushing over fresh footprints in the mud. "Boots," he said, "London-made, size 9, with a distinctive wear on the left heel. Our herald is no ghost, Watson, but a man of means, traveling from the city." As they followed the trail along the cliffs, the wind grew fiercer, fog thickening until the world was a blur of gray. Watson's heart pounded, the memory of Morag's tales vivid in his mind. Then, through the mist, he glimpsed a figure cloaked motionless, standing at the cliff's edge. "Holmes!" he hissed, but when he blinked, the figure was gone, swallowed by the fog. Holmes, unperturbed, continued along the path, his lantern a feeble beacon. "An illusion, Watson, or a deliberate distraction," he said. "The footprints lead to the cove below. We shall find answers there." The descent to the smuggler's cove was treacherous, the path slick with rain. Watson's boots slipped on the rocks, but Holmes moved with the surety of a mountain goat. At the cove, they found a cave mouth hidden behind gorse, its entrance marked by a fresh pile of seaweed, a clumsy attempt at concealment. Inside, the air was damp, the walls glistening with salt. Holmes' lantern revealed crates stacked against the rock, their contents obscured by tarpaulin. Holmes lifted a corner, exposing a cache of nautical instruments and papers, some bearing the guild's seal. Among them was a single sheet, written in code, a series of numbers and symbols. Holmes pocketed it, his eyes alight with discovery. "This is the key, Watson," he said. "The Herald's compass is no myth, and someone is using its legend to guard their activities here." As they prepared to leave, a low wail echoed through the cave, chilling Watson to the bone. It was the same sound they'd heard at the Herald's Rest, but here, in the confined space, it was deafening. Holmes' expression hardened. "An acoustic trick, as I suspected," he said. "A hidden device, likely triggered by our presence." He traced the sound to a narrow crevice where a small brass horn was embedded, connected to a mechanism of gears and bellows. "Clever," Holmes muttered, dismantling it with a flick of his knife, "but not clever enough." The storm broke as they emerged, rain lashing the cove. Watson, soaked and shivering, felt the weight of the unseen eyes Morag had described. Holmes, however, was undaunted, his mind already racing ahead. "The code we found links to London," he said. "The boots, the note, the guild's secrets all point to a single orchestrator. We return to the city tomorrow, Watson, but tonight we must weather the storm." They took shelter in the observatory, the wind howling outside. Watson, unable to sleep, kept watch, his revolver at hand. In the small hours, he thought he saw a shadow move beyond the broken dome, but when he rose, there was nothing but the storm. Holmes, sprawled on a makeshift bed of maps, stirred briefly. "Rest, Watson," he murmured. "The Herald may see all, but I see further." The next morning, as they prepared to depart, Holmes examined the coded paper again. "Celestial ciphers," he said, almost to himself. "The guild used the stars to hide their secrets. This points to a man named Mortimer Greaves, an antiquarian with a shop in London. He was once part of the Order of the Saffron Veil, expelled for reasons the ledger doesn't specify." Watson frowned. Greaves? Could he be the Herald? Holmes shook his head. "Unlikely, but he knows more than he'll admit." The footprints, the code, the stolen papers all suggest a network, Watson, not a lone actor. Greaves is a piece of the puzzle, but the Herald is someone else, someone with the skill to orchestrate this charade. As they boarded the ferry back to the mainland, Watson glanced at the cliffs, half expecting to see the cloaked figure again. The fog had lifted, revealing Dunmach's stark beauty, but the sense of being watched lingered. Holmes, standing at the bow, stared toward the horizon, the coded paper clutched in his hand. "To London, Watson," he said. "The Cove has given us a thread, and I intend to unravel it." The journey back was silent, the train's rhythm now a promise of answers. Watson, clutching the note in his pocket, felt a mix of dread and anticipation. The Herald's Rest, the Observatory, the Cove, all were pieces of a larger design, and Holmes was closing in. But as the train neared King's Cross, Watson couldn't shake the feeling that the Herald, whoever they were, was watching, waiting, and ready to strike dot in the days that followed. Holmes threw himself into deciphering the code, cross-referencing it with star charts and guild records. Watson, meanwhile, documented their findings, his pen scratching late into the night. The Smuggler's Cove had revealed a connection to London, but the true nature of the Herald's compass remained elusive. Was it a tool, a weapon, or something else entirely? And who was the cloaked figure, playing ghost to guard its secrets? Holmes' breakthrough came on the third night, as he sat surrounded by papers in their Baker Street rooms. "The cipher," he announced, "is based on the guild's celestial map. Each number corresponds to a star's position in the constellation they charted at Dunmach. The message points to Greaves' shop in Cheapside and a specific date tomorrow." Watson, bleary-eyed, set down his pen. "Tomorrow? What happens then?" Holmes' eyes glinted. "Either Greaves receives a delivery or he makes one. Either way, we shall be there." The next morning, they set out for Cheapside, the city bustling around them. Greaves' shop, a narrow storefront wedged between a tailor and a bookseller, was unassuming, its windows cluttered with dusty artifacts. Holmes, disguised as a clerk, entered first, while Watson waited across the street, his medical bag a pretext for loitering. Inside, Holmes found Greaves, a wiry man with nervous eyes, sorting papers behind a counter. The conversation, as Holmes later recounted, was brief but revealing. "Mr. Greaves," Holmes began, "I seek an item of interest, a compass perhaps from a certain guild." Greaves paled, his hands trembling. "I deal in antiquities, sir." "Not compasses. You're mistaken." Holmes pressed, mentioning the Saffron Veil. Greaves bolted, knocking over a display of brass instruments. Holmes gave chase, but Greaves vanished into the crowd. Watson, alerted by the commotion, joined Holmes as they searched the alleyways, finding only a dropped paper, a receipt for a crate shipped from Dunmach. "He's our link," Holmes said, pocketing the receipt, "but not our herald. Greaves is a pawn, frightened and expendable." That night, Holmes analyzed the receipt, linking it to a warehouse near the Thames. "The crate," he said, "contained something from the Cove, perhaps. The compass itself, we must move quickly." The warehouse was a looming structure, its doors locked but unguarded. Holmes picked the lock with ease, and they slipped inside, the air thick with the scent of tar and river mud. Crates lined the walls, one marked with the guild seal. Holmes pried it open, revealing a collection of maps and a single object. Brass compass, its needle twitching faintly, not toward north, but to a point in the room. Watson gasped. "The Herald's compass?" Holmes nodded, examining the device. "Mechanical, not mystical. But its purpose is unclear. The needle reacts to something nearby, perhaps another fragment." Before they could investigate further, footsteps echoed outside. Holmes doused their lantern, and they hid behind a stack of crates. A figure entered, cloaked and silent, moving with purpose toward the compass. Watson's heart raced, but Holmes signaled for silence. The figure took the compass and slipped away, leaving a note in its place. "The crypt awaits." Holmes read the note, his expression unreadable. "Est. Paul's Cathedral," he said. "The guild had a vault there, hidden for centuries. That's where we'll find our answers." As they left the warehouse, the city was quiet, the fog rolling in once more. Watson felt the weight of the mystery pressing down, the herald's shadow ever present. Holmes, however, walked with purpose, the note in his hand. "The crypt, Watson," he said. "The herald has invited us to their lair. Let us not keep them waiting." The journey to St. Paul's was swift, the cathedral's dome a beacon in the night. They descended a hidden stairwell, guided by the guild's symbols etched into the stone. The crypt was vast, its air cold and still. At its center stood an altar, identical to the one in the observatory, its surface marked with the Minji Observator. Saffron veil. Holmes approached, his lantern casting eerie shadows, and then, from the darkness, a voice. "You've come far, Mr. Holmes, but the herald's truth is not yours to claim." The cloaked figure stepped into the light, their face obscured. Watson drew his revolver, but Holmes raised a hand. "Who are you?" he demanded. "And what is the herald's compass?" The figure laughed, a sound both mocking and weary. "The compass points to truth, but truth is a burden. Leave now, or share the guild's fate." Before Holmes could respond, the figure vanished into the shadows, leaving only the echo of their words. Holmes knelt by the altar, finding a hidden panel. Inside was a fragment of the compass, its surface pulsing faintly. "Not supernatural," Holmes said, "but extraordinary. This mineral starstone perhaps holds the key." As they emerged from the crypt, the city was waking, unaware of the secrets beneath its streets. Holmes clutched the fragment, his mind already mapping their next move. "To Cornwall, Watson," he said. "The guild's final secret lies in a mine, and I intend to unearth it." Watson nodded, though his heart was heavy. The herald was no ghost, but their motives were murky, their power undeniable. As they hailed a cab, the fog parted, revealing the first rays of dawn. The chase was far from over, and the shadows on the isle had only deepened the mystery. Chapter 4. The smuggler's cipher. The wind howled across the Isle of Dunmach, carrying the salt of the sea and the weight of secrets long buried. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson stood at the edge of a jagged cliff, the smuggler's cove below. Them a shadowed crescent carved into the rocky coastline. The waves crashed relentlessly against the rocks, their rhythm a stark contrast to the stillness of the island's interior, where the ruins of the ancient observatory still lingered in their minds. Holmes' sharp eyes scanned the cove, his silhouette framed against the dim glow of a lantern they had brought from the village. Watson, bundled against the chill, clutched his notebook, his breath visible in the crisp night air. "Smugglers, Watson," Holmes said, his voice cutting through the wind. "This cove has seen more than fish and seaweed. The guild's secrets didn't vanish on this island. They were carried away, hidden in places like this." He pointed to a narrow path winding down the cliff, barely visible in the moonlight. "The Herald's compass is no myth, and I suspect its trail leads us here." Watson nodded, though his unease from the previous night's encounter with the fleeting figure in the fog had not dissipated. "You're certain those footprints at the observatory weren't just a local's? Some fisherman, perhaps, seeking shelter?" Holmes' lips twitched in a faint smile. "Fishermen don't wear boots crafted in Savile Row, Watson." The solace were too precise, the leather too fine. "Our quarry is no islander. He's a man of means, or at least one who travels between London and this forsaken place. Come, let us descend." The path to the cove was treacherous, slick with sea spray and crumbling stone. Holmes moved with the agility of a cat, his long coat flapping as he navigated the descent. Watson followed more cautiously, his military training keeping him steady despite the uneven terrain. The air grew heavier as they reached the cove, the scent of salt and decay mingling with something sharper lamp oil, perhaps, or the faint tang of metal. The cove itself was a natural harbor, shielded by towering cliffs on three sides, its entrance a narrow gap where the sea churned. A small, dilapidated jetty jutted into the water, its timbers warped and blackened. Holmes knelt at the jetty's edge, his fingers brushing the wood. "Recent repairs," he murmured. "The nails are new, the wood freshly cut. Someone has been here, and not long ago." He stood, his gaze sweeping the cove. "Search for anything out of place, Watson. Smugglers are meticulous, but they always leave traces." Watson scanned the rocky beach, his lantern casting long shadows across the pebbles. The cove was littered with debris-broken crates, tangled nets, and the skeletal remains of a small boat. He moved toward a pile of driftwood, his boots crunching on the shingle. Something caught his eye, a glint of metal beneath a heap of seaweed. He crouched, pulling the damp strands aside to reveal a rusted tin box, its lid sealed with a crude lock. "Holmes," he called. "Over here." Holmes was at his side in an instant, his eyes gleaming with interest. He examined the box, running his fingers over its surface. "Not as old as it appears," he said. "The rust is superficial, applied to deter curious eyes. A smuggler's trick." He produced a small tool from his pocket, a thin blade, and deftly pried open the lock. Inside was a bundle of papers, wrapped in oilskin to protect them from the damp. Holmes unfolded them carefully, revealing a series of maps and notes, their edges frayed but the ink still legible. The topmost sheet was a map of the cove, marked with symbols that matched those they had seen at the Heralds' Rest Tavern and the Observatory. A series of lines converged at a point labeled Cache, hidden beneath an overhang on the eastern cliff. Below the map were pages of dense, coded text, written in a script that seemed to blend letters and numbers in no discernible pattern. Holmes' eyes narrowed as he studied the code. A cipher, he said. Not a simple substitution, but something more complex. The guild was clever. They wouldn't trust their secrets to an easily cracked code. Watson peered over his shoulder, the lantern light illuminating the cryptic symbols. "Can you decipher it?" he asked, his voice tinged with doubt. Holmes' smile was almost predatory. "Given time, Watson, I can decipher anything. But this will require the right key. The symbols at the observatory, those celestial alignments, are likely the foundation. Let's find this cache first. It may hold more clues." They moved to the eastern cliff, where a narrow overhang jutted out like a frown. The rock face was smooth, worn by centuries of waves, but Holmes' keen eyes spotted a crevice, barely wide enough for a man to slip through. He squeezed inside, Watson following. With some difficulty, the crevice opened into a small cave, its walls damp and glistening. In the center was a wooden chest, reinforced with iron bands. Holmes examined it, noting the absence of a lock. "Careless," he muttered, "or confident." The chest creaked as he lifted the lid, revealing a collection of items wrapped in cloth. Holmes unwrapped one, revealing a brass sextant, its surface etched with the same guild symbols. Another cloth held a small vial of dark liquid, its contents shimmering faintly in the lantern light. The final item was a leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with more coded text and sketches of a compass-like device, the Herald's compass, Watson presumed. Holmes flipped through the notebook, his fingers pausing on a page with a detailed drawing of the compass, its needle pointing to a star. "This is no ordinary compass," Holmes said, his voice low. "The guild's obsession with celestial navigation suggests this device is calibrated to something beyond mere geography. The starstone, perhaps, or a location tied to it." He pocketed the notebook and the vial, leaving the sextant. "We'll need to analyze these in London. The cipher will take time, but I suspect it points to someone in the city, a keeper of the guild's secrets." As they emerged from the cave, a shadow moved at the edge of the cove. Watson's hand went to his revolver, but Holmes raised a hand to stay him. "Not yet," he whispered. The shadow vanished into the darkness, leaving only the sound of retreating footsteps. Holmes' expression was grim. "We're being watched, Watson. Our presence here has stirred something or someone." The journey back to London was a tense affair, the train rattling through the night as Holmes pored over the notebook. Watson tried to rest, but the image of the shadow in the cove haunted him. He glanced at Holmes, who was muttering to himself, his pencil scratching across a sheet of paper as he tested cipher combinations. "Any progress?" Watson asked. Holmes didn't look up. "The cipher is based on a Polybius square, but it's layered with a transposition cipher tied to the celestial alignments we saw at the observatory. The key is a specific star pattern, likely Orion, given its prominence in the guild's maps. I've narrowed it down to a sequence of numbers corresponding to star positions." He paused, his eyes gleaming. "The first message mentions a name, Mortimer Greaves, an antiquarian in London. He was a member of the Order of the Saffron Veil, expelled for theft decades ago. The guild believed he stole the Herald's compass. Watson frowned. If Greaves has the compass, why all this? Secrecy? Why the ghost? Holmes leaned back, his fingers steepled. The ghost is a distraction, Watson. A means to keep curious minds away from the guild's secrets. Greaves, or someone working with him, is using the legend of the Forgotten Herald to guard something, perhaps the Starstone itself. We'll pay Mr. Greaves a visit. London greeted them with its familiar fog, the streets of Whitechapel bustling despite the late hour. Holmes led the way to a narrow street off Fleet Market, where Mortimer Greaves' antiquarian shop stood, its windows dark and shuttered. The sign above the door read, "Greaves and Sons, Rare Books and Artifacts," though Holmes noted dryly that Greaves had no sons. They knocked, but no answer came. Holmes produced his lot-picking tools, and within moments, they were inside. The shop was a labyrinth of shelves, cluttered with dusty tomes, cracked pottery, and faded maps. A faint smell of mildew hung in the air, mingling with the scent of old leather. Holmes moved with purpose, his lantern casting eerie shadows as he examined the shelves. Watson followed, his unease growing. "This place feels like a tomb," he muttered. "An apt comparison," Holmes replied, pausing at a desk littered with papers. He rifled through them, his fingers deft and precise. "Greaves is meticulous, but careless in his haste. Look here." He held up a letter, its wax seal broken. The handwriting matched the coded messages from the Cove, and it bore a single line. "The crypt holds the truth. St. Paul's, third vault." Watson's eyes widened. St. Paul's Cathedral? Surely not. Holmes' smile was grim. The guild was bold, Watson. Hiding their secrets beneath one of London's most sacred sites is precisely the kind of audacity they'd employ. He continued his search, moving to a bookshelf at the back of the shop. His fingers brushed the spine of a particularly worn volume, and a soft click echoed in the silence. The shelf swung inward, revealing a hidden panel. Behind it was a small alcove containing a single item, a map of St. Paul's Cathedral, with a red circle marking a crypt beneath the nave. Holmes unfolded the map, his eyes scanning the intricate lines. "This is our destination," he said. "But first we confront Greaves. He's no innocent antiquarian." They found Greaves in a back room, hunched over a table strewn with artifacts. He was a thin man, his hair white and thinning, his eyes darting nervously as Holmes and Watson entered. "Mr. Holmes," he said, his voice trembling. I didn't expect visitors." Holmes' gaze was unrelenting. "You've been expecting us since Dunmach, Mr. Greaves. The Herald's compass, the Starstone, the Order of the Saffron Veil. Shall we discuss your role in this charade?" Greaves paled, his hands shaking as he backed away. "I don't know what you mean," he stammered. "I'm just a dealer in old things." Holmes stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "You were expelled from the guild for stealing the Herald's compass. You've been using the myth of the Forgotten Herald to keep its secrets hidden, haven't you? The coded messages, the smuggler's cache, they all point to you." Greaves' eyes flicked to the door, and in a sudden burst of desperation, he bolted. Watson lunged, but Greaves was surprisingly agile, slipping past and disappearing into the fog outside. Holmes didn't pursue, his expression calm. "Let him run," he said. "He's given us what we need." Watson frowned. "The map?" "And his fear," Holmes replied. Greaves is a pawn, Watson. Someone else is pulling the strings, a mind clever enough to orchestrate this spectral farce. The crypt will tell us more. They left the shop, the map clutched in Holmes' hand. The streets of London were quiet now, the fog thicker than ever, swallowing the gaslights in a pale haze. Watson felt a chill that had little to do with the cold. "Do you think Greaves is the Herald?" he asked. Holmes shook his head. "The Herald is a role, Watson, not a single man. Greaves is involved, but he's not the figure we saw on the island. That was someone else, someone with a deeper stake in the guild's secrets." He paused, his eyes distant. "The crypt beneath St. Paul's holds the answers. We'll find the truth there, or we'll find the Herald himself." The great dome of St. Paul's loomed above them as they approached, its silhouette a silent sentinel in the night. The cathedral's doors were locked, but Holmes, ever resourceful, found a side entrance used by the groundskeepers. They slipped inside, the air cool and heavy with the scent of stone and wax. The nave was vast, its arches soaring into shadow, but Holmes led the way unerringly to a spiral staircase descending into the crypts. The crypt was a maze of stone corridors, their walls lined with plaques and effigies. Holmes consulted the map, his lantern casting flickering light across the ancient stone. "The third vault," he murmured, counting the passages. They reached a heavy iron door, its surface etched with the same guild symbols they had seen before. Holmes examined the lock, his fingers tracing its contours. "Old, but recently used," he said. "The oil on the hinges is fresh." He worked the lock with his tools, and the door creaked open, revealing a chamber unlike any other in the crypt. The walls were covered in maps, their lines glowing faintly in the lantern light, as if inked with something other than pigment. At the center of the room was an altar, its surface carved with a star map that matched the one in the Cornish mine. On the altar lay a single object, a fragment of the Herald's compass, its needle trembling as if alive. Holmes lifted the fragment, his eyes narrowing. "This is no ordinary device," he said. "The guild crafted something extraordinary, a tool that aligns with the stars, perhaps to locate the starstone itself." He turned to Watson, his expression grave. "We're close, Watson. Too close. The Herald will come for this, and when he does, we'll be ready." Watson gripped his revolver, the weight of the crypt pressing down on him. The air was thick with anticipation, the silence broken only by the faint hum of the compass fragment. Somewhere in the shadows, he felt the presence of unseen eyes, watching, waiting. The Herald was near, and the truth of the guild's secrets was within their grasp, but at what cost? They left the crypt, the compass fragment secured in Holmes' pocket. The fog outside had thickened, cloaking London in an impenetrable veil. Watson's heart pounded as they stepped into the night, the map and the fragment their only guides. Greaves' escape, the Herald's warnings, the guild's lost legacy all converged on this moment, and Watson knew the game was far from over. Holmes paused at the cathedral's steps, his eyes scanning the fog. "The Herald is watching, Watson," he said softly, "but so are we. The next move is ours." The streets of London swallowed them as they walked, the compass fragment a silent promise of truths yet to be uncovered. The smuggler's cipher had led them here, but the crypt's secrets hinted at a larger conspiracy, one that stretched from the forgotten isles of Scotland to the heart of the city. Holmes' mind was already racing, piecing together the fragments of the puzzle, while Watson steeled himself for the dangers ahead. The Herald's shadow loomed, and the game was only beginning. Chapter 5. The Crypt's Keeper. The air beneath St. Paul's Cathedral was damp and heavy, the kind of cold that clung to the bones and made every breath feel like a trespass. Sherlock Holmes descended the narrow stone steps, his lantern casting long, wavering shadows that danced across the ancient walls. Dr. John Watson followed close behind, his footsteps echoing faintly, a revolver tucked discreetly in his coat pocket. The crypt they entered was a forgotten relic, a labyrinth of crumbling arches and moss-slicked stones, buried beneath the grandeur of the cathedral above. The symbols they had seen in the Herald's Rest, Tavern intricate loops and angular lines, remnants of the Order of the Saffron Veil, were etched here too, carved into the walls with a precision that spoke of purpose. Holmes paused, raising his lantern to inspect a cluster of symbols near a rusted iron gate. "These are not mere decorations, Watson," he said, his voice low but sharp, cutting through the oppressive silence. "They form a cipher, a directional code." The guild was meticulous, even in its decline. Watson, peering over Holmes' shoulder, frowned at the cryptic markings. "A map, then?" "Leading to what?" "Not a map, but a guide," Holmes replied, his fingers tracing the lines. "A sequence to unlock something within this crypt. The Herald's compass, I suspect, or what remains of it." He stepped back, his keen eyes scanning the chamber. The crypt was vast, its ceiling lost in shadow, with alcoves branching off into darkness. The air carried a faint metallic tang, as if the stones themselves were bleeding rust. Watson shifted uneasily, his hand resting on the revolver's grip. "I don't like this place, Holmes. It feels watched." Holmes' lips twitched in a faint smile. "Your instincts are not entirely wrong, my friend, but it is not the dead we should fear here. The living are far more troublesome." They pressed deeper into the crypt, guided by the symbols. Holmes moved with the precision of a bloodhound, pausing to examine faint scratches on the floor or a displaced stone. Watson, though accustomed to his friend's methods, felt the weight of the place pressing on him. The crypt seemed to hum with secrets, each step stirring echoes that sounded almost like whispers at the heart of the crypt. They found an altar, its surface worn smooth by time but marked with the same guild symbols. At its center lay a shallow indentation, shaped like a star with 8 uneven points. Holmes knelt, examining it closely. "This is where the Herald's compass was meant to rest," he said. "See the grooves? They suggest a mechanism, likely spring-loaded." The compass was not merely a navigational tool, it was a key. Before Watson could respond, a low, resonant hum filled the chamber, followed by the scrape of stone on stone. Both men froze, their eyes darting to the shadows. From an alcove across the crypt, a figure emerged, a tall, hooded shape, cloaked in black, its face obscured by a scarf embroidered with the guild's insignia. The figure's presence was commanding, its movements deliberate, as if it belonged to the crypt as much as the stones themselves. "Leave this place," the figure intoned, its voice deep and distorted, echoing unnaturally. "The Heralds' secrets are not for you. Turn back or meet the fate of those who came before." Watson's hand tightened on his revolver, but Holmes raised a hand to stay him. "A theatrical performance," Holmes said, his tone almost amused. "The Forgotten Herald, I presume? Your acoustics are impressive, but your timing is predictable. You've been watching us since we entered." The figure stiffened, clearly unprepared for Holmes' nonchalance. "You mock what you cannot comprehend," it said, stepping closer. The lantern light caught a glint of metal at its side, a blade, perhaps, or something more intricate. The Herald sees all. The compass must remain hidden. Holmes' eyes narrowed, his mind racing. Hidden from whom? The guild is long gone, its members scattered or dead. Yet you guard this place, staging your spectral charade. Why? What does the compass protect? The figure lunged without warning, a blur of motion. Watson drew his revolver, but Holmes was faster, sidestepping and seizing the figure's arm. A brief struggle ensued, the hooded cloak tangling as Holmes twisted the figure's wrist. A metallic object clattered to the ground, a fragment of a device no larger than a pocket watch, its surface engraved with celestial patterns. The figure wrenched free, vanishing into the shadows with a speed that defied the crypt's confines. Watson retrieved the object, holding it to the light. "Is this the Herald's compass?" "A piece of it," Holmes said, taking it from Watson's hand. He turned it over, noting its intricate gears and a faint pulsing glow at its core. Not a supernatural artifact, as the legends claim, but a mechanical marvel. See the craftsmanship. This is no mere compass, it's a chronometer aligned to celestial movements. Remarkable. Watson glanced nervously at the alcove where the figure had vanished. That was no ghost, Holmes. Whoever they are, they're flesh and blood and dangerous. Indeed, Holmes said, pocketing the fragment. But their motives are clearer now. This herald is protecting something specific, something tied to the guild's final days. We analyze this fragment at Baker Street. It may hold the key to their identity. They made their way back to the surface, the crypt's oppressive air giving way to the damp chill of London's night. At 221B Baker Street, Holmes set to work, his desk a chaos of tools and magnifying glasses. The compass fragment lay under scrutiny, its gears exposed like the innards of a living thing. Watson watched, nursing a brandy to steady his nerves. The fragment contains a mineral residue, Holmes said, peering through a microscope. A rare silicate, not native to London. My chemical tests suggest it's from a specific vein found only in a derelict mine in Cornwall. The guild must have sourced it there. Cornwall? Watson said, surprised. That's a long way from Whitechapel. Why go to such lengths? Because this mineral is the heart of the compass's function, Holmes replied. Its properties suggest an unusual refractive quality, perhaps amplifying light or energy. The guild's obsession with celestial alignments wasn't mere mysticism, they were harnessing something tangible. Watson frowned. You're saying this compass, what, manipulates light? To what end? Not light alone, Holmes said, leaning back in his chair. Perception. The guild's ledger mentioned the Herald's compass, pointing to hidden truths. I suspect it was designed to reveal patterns or signals, invisible to the naked eye, perhaps tied to their expeditions, but someone wants that power concealed. Watson set down his glass. The Herald. They're not just protecting the compass, they're protecting whatever it reveals. Precisely, Holmes said, his eyes gleaming. And Cornwall is our next destination. The mine will hold answers, perhaps the rest of the compass, or evidence of the guild's final work. The journey to Cornwall was a blur of steam trains and rolling moors, the landscape growing wilder as they approached the coast. The mine, known as Wheelveyor, was a crumbling relic, its entrance half buried under gorse and shale. The locals spoke of it with unease, claiming it was cursed since the guild's expedition vanished there decades ago. Holmes dismissed their tales, but noted their fear, a useful indicator of recent activity. Inside the mine, the air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. Holmes' lantern illuminated a maze of tunnels, their walls scarred by pickaxes and time. Watson's unease grew with each step, the darkness seeming to press closer. "This place feels like a tomb," he muttered. "A tomb with recent visitors," Holmes said, pointing to a set of fresh boot prints in the dust. "These are the same as those on Dunmach's cliffs. Our herald is consistent in their choice of footwear." They followed the prints to a deeper chamber, where the air grew colder and the walls glistened with moisture. At its center was a rough-hewn table, strewn with tools and a lantern still warm to the touch. Holmes sifted through the debris, finding scraps of paper with celestial notations and a vial of shimmering powder, more of the silicate mineral. "This is no abandoned site," Holmes said. "Someone has been working here, refining the mineral. Look at the precision of these tools, modern, not relics of the guild." Before Watson could reply, a low rumble shook the chamber. Dust rained from the ceiling, and a shadow moved at the tunnel's mouth. The herald appeared again, cloaked and silent, holding a device that gleamed faintly. "You should not have come," the figure said, its voice echoing with menace. Holmes stepped forward, undeterred. "Your warnings grow tiresome. Tell me, what does the Starstone do? Why guard it with such fervor?" The figure hesitated, then raised the device. A beam of light shot forth, not blinding but disorienting, filling Watson's vision with fleeting patterns, stars, maps, faces he couldn't place. Holmes lunged, knocking the device from the figure's hand, but the herald triggered a mechanism. The chamber shook violently, stones collapsing as the tunnel began to cave in. "Watson, run!" Holmes shouted, grabbing the journal from the table. They scrambled through the collapsing tunnel, dust choking their lungs. A final surge of adrenaline carried them to the surface, but Watson stumbled, trapped by falling debris. As Holmes turned back, a figure emerged from the shadows, not the herald, but a woman, her face obscured by a scarf. She worked swiftly, freeing Watson with a strength that belied her slight frame. "Go," she said, her voice urgent but steady. "He's not done with you." Holmes pulled Watson to safety, but when they turned, the woman was gone. They collapsed on the moor, gasping, the journal clutched in Holmes' hand. The night was silent now, the mine's entrance sealed by rubble. Who was she? Watson panted, his heart still racing. "A new player," Holmes said, his eyes scanning the darkness. She knew the mine's layout and the herald's methods. A descendant of the guild, perhaps, or an ally. "She saved you, but her motives are unclear." He opened the journal, its pages brittle but intact. The entries detailed the guild's discovery of the Starstone, a mineral that, when refined, could amplify the mind's eye, revealing patterns in the stars or unlocking hidden knowledge. The guild had sought to use it for exploration, but its power proved unstable, driving some members to madness. "The herald's obsession makes sense now," Holmes said. "The Starstone is no mere trinket, it's a tool of immense potential and danger. The compass was built to harness it, but someone wants it buried." Watson rubbed his bruised shoulder. "And the woman?" She didn't seem to share the herald's zeal. "Perhaps not," Holmes said, rising. but she knows more than she revealed. We must find her and the rest of the compass. The Starstones. Secrets are still out there, and so is our cloaked adversary. They return to London. The journal and the compass fragment their only leads. Holmes spent hours at Baker Street, cross-referencing the journal's cryptic notes with geological surveys and guild records. The woman's intervention gnawed at him, an unexpected variable in a case already thick with deception. Watson, nursing his injuries, watched his friend with a mix of admiration and concern. "You're certain about Cornwall?" Watson asked, breaking the silence. "What if the Herald follows us again?" Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling toward the ceiling. "Let them come, Watson. Each move they make reveals more of their game. The crypt was a beginning, the mine a confirmation. The Starstone's power is real, and someone is desperate to control it. We are closer than they realize." The night deepened, and Holmes turned back to his work, the compass fragment glinting faintly on his desk. Watson settled into his chair, the weight of the case settling over him like the fog outside. The Herald was still out there, a shadow in the dark, but Holmes' resolve was unshaken. The truth, as always, was within reach. They need only follow the clues. Chapter 6. Echoes in the mine. The train to Cornwall rattled through the night, its rhythmic clatter a stark contrast to the oppressive silence that had settled over Holmes and Watson since their departure from the Isle of Dunmach. The carriage was dimly lit, the gas lamps flickering with every jolt, casting long shadows across the worn velvet seats. Holmes sat by the window, his sharp profile etched against the darkness outside, his eyes fixed on some invisible point beyond the glass. Watson, seated opposite, clutched a Guild's journal they had recovered from the Observatory, its leather cover worn but intact, its pages heavy with secrets yet to be unraveled. The journey had been undertaken in haste, spurred by the discovery of the Herald's compass fragment and the cryptic clues pointing to a derelict mine in Cornwall. Holmes had been unusually reticent, his mind evidently consumed by the puzzle of the Forgotten Herald. Watson, for his part, felt the weight of their recent encounters, the ghostly figure on the cliffs, the hidden chamber, the storm that had nearly trapped them. The note from the cloaked figure, "The Herald sees all," still lingered in his mind, a warning that refused to be dismissed. As dawn broke, painting the sky in streaks of pale gold, the train slowed, and the rugged coastline of Cornwall came into view. The air was sharp with the tang of salt and the faint metallic scent of the earth, a reminder of the region's mining past. Holmes stirred, his gaze sharpening as he surveyed the landscape. "We are close, Watson," he said, his voice low but resolute. "The mine is our destination, and within it, I suspect, lies the heart of this mystery." They disembarked at a small windswept station, where a hired cart awaited to carry them to the village of St. Agnes, near the derelict Wheel Owl's mine. The driver, a weathered man with a face like carved granite, spoke little, his eyes darting nervously as he urged the horses along the narrow, winding road. The mine, he muttered, was cursed, abandoned after a collapse decades ago that claimed a dozen lives. Locals avoided it, claiming strange lights and sounds emanated from its depths. Watson felt a chill, though he attributed it to the brisk sea breeze rather than superstition. The cart halted at the edge of a barren stretch of land, where the mine's entrance loomed like a dark wound in the hillside. Rusted machinery and crumbling timbers marked the site, the remnants of a once thriving industry now swallowed by time. Holmes wasted no time, striding toward the entrance with his lantern held high, its beam cutting through the morning mist. Watson followed, his medical bag slung over his shoulder, a revolver tucked discreetly in his coat, a precaution he had insisted upon despite Holmes's dismissive wave. The mine's entrance was a jagged maw, its wooden supports sagging under the weight of years. A faint draft carried the scent of damp stone and something acrid, almost chemical. Holmes paused, examining the ground. "Fresh tracks," he murmured, crouching to inspect a set of boot prints in the mud. "Recent, no more than a day old. Our herald, or his agent, has been here." They ventured inside, the darkness swallowing the light of their lanterns. The tunnel sloped downward, its walls slick with moisture, the air growing colder with each step. The silence was broken only by the drip of water and the occasional creak of the timbers above. Watson's heart quickened, his soldier's instincts alert to the oppressive weight of the earth around them. Holmes, however, moved with the precision of a bloodhound, his eyes scanning every surface for clues. After what felt like hours, but was likely minutes, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber, its ceiling supported by rough-hewn pillars. Scattered about were signs of recent activity, a pile of fresh tools, a stack of crates, and a lantern, its wick still warm. Holmes's expression hardened. "Someone has been working here, and recently," he said, lifting the lantern to inspect its make. "London manufacture, high quality. Not the sort a common laborer would carry." Watson approached the crates, prying one open with a crowbar left nearby. Inside were vials of a shimmering, crystalline substance, glowing faintly in the dim light. "Holmes, what is this?" he asked, holding up a vial. The substance seemed to pulse, its light shifting like liquid starlight. Holmes took the vial, his eyes narrowing. "Starstone," he said, his voice tinged with recognition. The guild's journal mentioned it, a mineral they believed enhanced perception, perhaps even altered the mind. This is what the Order of the Saffron Veil sought, and what the Herald seeks to protect or exploit. He pocketed the vial and continued his inspection, his lantern illuminating a series of carvings on the chamber's walls. They were intricate, depicting a star map with constellations unfamiliar to Watson. At the center was a symbol they had seen before, a compass encircled by a saffron veil, the guild's emblem. Holmes traced the lines with his finger, his mind racing. "This is no mere mine," he said. "It's a repository, a vault for the guild's discoveries. The Starstone, the compass, the Herald all are linked to this place." Their exploration was interrupted by a low, resonant hum, like the vibration of a tuning fork. It seemed to come from deeper within the mine, echoing through the tunnels. Watson's hand went to his revolver, but Holmes raised a hand, signaling. "Caution, follow the sound," he said, his voice steady. "It will lead us to answers." The hum grew louder as they navigated a labyrinth of tunnels, the air growing thicker, almost oppressive. The walls here were smoother, as if deliberately carved, and the carvings became more frequent maps, symbols, and cryptic phrases in Latin. Watson's Latin was rusty, but he caught fragments: Stella Veritatis, the Star of Truth, and Cave Fellis, beware the cat. The latter puzzled him, but Holmes pressed on, undeterred. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling soaring high above, lost in shadow. At its center was a massive stone slab carved with a star map that mirrored the one on the walls. The hum was deafening now, emanating from a pedestal at the slab's center, where a second fragment of the Herald's compass rested, its needle spinning wildly. Holmes approached, his face illuminated by the faint glow of the compass. "This is it, Watson," he said. "The key to the guild's secrets." Before he could examine it further, a figure emerged from the shadows, the Herald, cloaked in black, his face obscured by a hood. His voice was low, almost a growl. "You should not have come here, Holmes. The Starstone is not for you." Watson drew his revolver, but Holmes stepped forward, unafraid. "Enough of this charade," he said. "You are no ghost, but a man with a purpose. Tell me, who do you serve, the guild or yourself?" The Herald laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You see much, but not all. The Starstone is a power beyond your understanding. Leave, or you will not see the dawn." The standoff was broken by a sudden tremor, the ground shaking beneath their feet. Dust and pebbles rained from the ceiling, and a deep groan echoed through. "The chamber, the mine is unstable," Watson shouted, grabbing Holmes's arm. The Herald darted toward his side tunnel, but not before triggering a mechanism, a lever hidden in the pedestal. The chamber began to collapse, stones falling like thunder. Holmes seized the compass fragment, shoving it into his coat as he and Watson ran for the nearest tunnel. The ground buckled, forcing them to dive into a narrow passage as the chamber caved in behind them. The air was thick with dust, the sound of falling rock deafening. Watson's heart pounded, his mind racing with the fear of being buried alive. Holmes, however, remained calm, his lantern cutting through the haze. They emerged into another tunnel, but the collapse had separated them from the main chamber. Watson's relief was short-lived. A faint cry echoed from deeper within. "Someone's trapped," he said, his doctor's instincts kicking in. Holmes nodded, and they followed the sound. Navigating a maze of crumbling passages in a small alcove, they found a woman, her leg pinned under a fallen beam. She was young, with dark hair and fierce eyes, her clothes practical but worn. "Help me," she gasped, her voice strained but resolute. Watson knelt beside her, assessing the injury, while Holmes examined the beam. Together they lifted it, freeing her. She winced but stood, leaning on Watson for support. "Who are you?" Holmes demanded, his tone sharp but not unkind. "And what do you know of the Herald?" The woman hesitated, then spoke. "My name is Eliza Dunmach. I'm a descendant of the Order of the Saffron Veil, the Herald. He's my brother, Alistair. He's not himself. The Starstone changed him. He thinks he's protecting its secrets, but he's lost to it." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Your brother triggered that cave-in. He meant to trap us." "Why?" Eliza shook her head, her expression anguished. "He believes the Starstone must be hidden, that its power corrupts. I followed him here to stop him, but I was too late. The guild's legacy, it's a curse." Watson, tending to her leg, noted the sincerity in her voice. "She's telling the truth, Holmes," he said quietly. "She risked her life to be here." Holmes considered this, then nodded. "Very well, Miss Dunmach. You will come with us. But first we must escape this mine." The journey out was perilous, the tunnels unstable, the air thick with dust. Holmes led the way, using his knowledge of the mine's layout gleaned from the guild's journal to navigate. Eliza, despite her injury, proved resilient, offering insights into the guild's history. She spoke of their final expedition, of the Starstone's discovery, and of the madness that followed. "My grandfather was part of it," she said. "He warned that the Starstone amplified the mind's desires, greed, fear, ambition. It drove the guild to ruin." As they neared the surface, the hum of the Starstone returned, faint but persistent. Holmes paused, holding up the compass fragment. Its needle pointed not north, but toward a side tunnel. "There's more here," he said. "The Herald may have fled, but he left something behind." Against Watson's protests, Holmes followed, the needle leading them to a hidden alcove. There, concealed behind a false wall, was a journal newer than the guild's, its pages filled with Alistair's scrawled notes. They detailed his obsession with the Starstone, his belief that it could reshape the world, and his fear of its misuse. One entry stood out. "Greaves seeks the stone. He betrayed the guild once. He will do so again." Holmes closed the journal, his expression grim. "Mortimer Greaves," he said. "The antiquarian is more than he seems. He's no mere thief, but a puppet master in this drama." They emerged from the mine as dusk fell, the sky a bruise of purple and gold. Eliza limped but refused further aid, her determination mirroring Holmes's. Watson, exhausted but resolute, carried the journal, its weight a reminder of the stakes. The Herald was still out there, as was Greaves, and the Starstone's power remained a threat. Holmes turned to Eliza. "Your brother is dangerous, but he's not the only one. Will you help us stop him?" Eliza met his gaze, her eyes fierce. "I'll do whatever it takes to end this. For my family, for the guild." The trio set off for the village, the mine's echoes fading behind them. Holmes's mind was already racing ahead, piecing together the fragments of the puzzle. The Starstone, the compass, the guild's secrets, they were all converging on London, where the next chapter of this mystery awaited. Watson, glancing at the darkening sky, felt a mix of dread and resolve. The Herald's shadow loomed large, but with Holmes leading the way, no mystery was beyond solving. As they boarded a cart back to the station, Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling into the night air. "The game is afoot, Watson," he said, his voice steady, "and it grows more dangerous by the hour." The cart rattled on, carrying them toward an uncertain future, the Starstone's hum a faint, persistent echo in their minds. Chapter 7. The Descendant's Tale. The train back to London rattled through the night, its rhythmic clatter a counterpoint to the storm of thoughts swirling in Sherlock Holmes' mind. The Cornish mine had yielded secrets, Starstone, a journal, a cave-in, and the fleeting glimpse of a woman who claimed a connection to the vanished Order of the Saffron Veil. Dr. John Watson, seated opposite Holmes in the dimly lit carriage, scribbled in his notebook, his face etched with the strain of their recent ordeal. The journal, now tucked securely in Holmes' coat, held fragments of the guild's downfall, but the woman's sudden appearance and disappearance gnawed at him. She was no phantom, yet her motives remained as elusive as the Forgotten Herald itself. Holmes leaned back, his sharp eyes fixed on the passing shadows beyond the window. "Watson," he said, his voice low, "the woman who aided you in the mine, she spoke of the guild, did she not? Describe her precisely. Every detail matters." Watson closed his notebook, rubbing his temple as he recalled the encounter. She was tall, perhaps 5'8", with dark hair pinned tightly beneath a hood. Her eyes were striking green, I think, though the lantern light made it hard to be certain. Her voice was steady, educated, with a faint Scottish burr. She wore a heavy cloak, practical boots, and moved with purpose, as if she knew the mine's tunnels intimately. She said her name was Eliza, a descendant of the guild's founder, and that her brother was involved somehow. She vanished before I could ask more. Holmes' fingers steepled beneath his chin. Eliza, a descendant. And her brother, you. Say, this complicates matters. The Herald's actions, calculated, theatrical, suggest a mind unhinged, yet purposeful. If this Eliza speaks truth, her brother may be our spectral figure, but her role is unclear. Ally or deceiver. We must find her. The train's whistle pierced the night as it slowed into King's Cross Station. London's fog greeted them, thick and acrid, curling around gas lamps like a living thing. Holmes, ever alert, scanned the platform for signs of pursuit. The cryptic note from the museum, "The Herald sees all," still lingered in his mind, a warning that their quarry was never far. As they hailed a hansom cab to Baker Street, Holmes instructed the driver to take a circuitous route through Bloomsbury. Wary of unseen eyes, at 221B, Mrs. Hudson greeted them with tea and a fire already crackling in the grate. Holmes spread the Guild's journal across his desk, its brittle pages yellowed but intact. The entries, written in a precise hand, detailed the order of the Saffron Vale's final years. Founded in the 17th century, the Guild had mapped uncharted lands, their cartographers revered for their precision. But in 1847, their last expedition to the Isle of Dunmach uncovered the Starstone, a mineral said to sharpen the mind to unnatural clarity. The journal's author, one Alastair Dunmach, described its effects with reverence and fear. It unveils truths hidden from mortal eyes, but its light consumes the weak. We were fools to think we could wield it. Holmes paused, his finger tracing a faded sketch of the Herald's compass, its intricate gears illustrated with care. This starstone, he mused, is no mere trinket. Its properties suggest a chemical or crystalline anomaly, perhaps amplifying neural activity. The Guild's dissolution coincides with its discovery madness, betrayal, exile. Alastair Dunmach must be Eliza's ancestor. If her brother believes he's protecting this legacy, his actions make sense, but why the charade of the Herald? Watson, nursing a brandy, frowned. Holmes, you're suggesting this mineral drove the Guild to ruin? And now, what her brother's using it, or guarding it? And Eliza, why help me, then flee? Precisely the questions we must answer, Holmes replied, lighting his pipe. The Starstone's power, real or imagined, is the key. Eliza's knowledge of the mine suggests she's no stranger to its secrets. We must locate her, and I suspect London's underbelly holds the clue. The next morning, Holmes dispatched telegrams to his network of informants, street urchins, cabbies, and dock workers known as the Baker Street Irregulars. He tasked them with tracking a woman matching Eliza's description, likely operating in the city's less savory districts. By noon, a ragged boy named Wiggins arrived with a lead. A tall woman in a dark cloak had been seen entering a boarding house in Limehouse, a warren of opium dens and sailors' haunts. Holmes, wasting no time, donned a disguise of dock workers, cap and weathered coat, and set out with Watson. Limehouse was a labyrinth of narrow alleys, the air thick with coal smoke and the tang of the Thames. The boarding house, a sagging 3-story structure on Narrow Street, bore the faded sign, "The Anchor's Rest." Holmes knocked, his demeanor shifting to that of a gruff laborer seeking a room. The landlady, a wiry woman with suspicious eyes, confirmed. A tenant matching Eliza's description had taken a room 2 days prior. "Keeps to herself," the landlady muttered. "Pays in advance. Dunno her name." Holmes slipped her a shilling and requested a look at the register. The name listed was Dunmach. His pulse quickened. "Watson," he whispered as they climbed. "The creaking stairs. Be ready. She may not welcome our intrusion." The door to room 3B was ajar. Holmes nudged it open, revealing a Spartan chamber, a cot, a washstand, and a small table strewn with maps and papers. A woman stood at the window, her back to them, her silhouette framed by the gray light. "I wondered when you'd find me," she said without turning. Her voice carried the same Scottish lilt Watson had described. "Sherlock Holmes, I presume?" "And Dr. Watson." Holmes stepped forward, his disguise discarded in his tone. "Miss Eliza Dunmach, I take it. Your intervention in the mine saved my friend, but your disappearance raises questions. Why flee? And what is your brother's role in this affair of the Forgotten Herald?" Eliza turned, her green eyes sharp and assessing. She was indeed tall, her dark hair pinned tightly, her cloak draped over a chair. "You've read the journal," she said, gesturing to the table. "My great-grandfather, Alistair, led the guild to its doom. The Starstone was their obsession, a crystal that promised wisdom but brought madness. My brother, Caleb, believes he's its guardian. He's the herald, Mr. Holmes. He's been watching you, staging the hauntings to keep you away." Watson, standing by the door, gripped his cane. "Your brother? Why the theatrics? The tavern, the isle, the crypt. He's been terrorizing people." Eliza's expression hardened. "Caleb's not well. The Starstone, it changes you. He found a fragment years ago, hidden by our family. It sharpened his mind but twisted it. He sees himself as the guild's last protector, ensuring no one claims its secrets. I've tried to stop him, but he's elusive. When I heard you were investigating, I followed you to Cornwall, hoping to intervene." Holmes studied her, his gaze piercing. "And the mine? You knew its layout." "You've been there before." She nodded. "Our family's tied to the Starstone's legacy. I explored the mine as a girl, searching for answers about the guild. I found Caleb's hideout, a chamber where he keeps his tools, his maps. He's obsessed, Mr. Holmes. He believes the Starstone must remain hidden, or it'll destroy more lives." Holmes paced the room, his mind racing. "This explains the Herald's movements, calculated, yet erratic. But you, Miss Dunmach, what is your aim? You saved Watson, yet you conceal yourself. Are you protecting your brother or the Starstone?" Eliza reached into her cloak and produced a small metallic object, a second fragment of the Heralds. Compass, its gears glinting faintly. "I want to end this," she said. "Caleb's lost to reason, but I believe you can stop him. This fragment was our father's. It pairs with the one you found in the crypt. Together, they point to a vault. Beneath the Thames, a place the guild hid their greatest secrets." Holmes took the fragment, its weight heavier than its size suggested. He aligned it with the piece from the crypt, and the two clicked together, forming a near-complete compass. Tiny gears whirred, and a faint glow pulsed from its center, illuminating a map etched on its surface. The map depicted a network of tunnels. Beneath the Thames, converging on a single point near the tower bridge. Remarkable, Holmes murmured, his eyes tracing the lines. A mechanical cartographer guiding us to the guild's final sanctuary. Watson, we must prepare. The vault holds the Starstone source and, I suspect, the truth of Caleb's madness. Watson, still wary, addressed Eliza. Why should? We trust you. You've admitted your brother's dangerous, and you've been shadowing us. How do we know you're not leading us into a trap? Eliza's gaze softened, but her voice remained firm. I've lost my family to this curse, Dr. Watson. My brother's all I have left, and I want to save him, not enable him. If you don't, trust me, trust the compass. It's never lied. Holmes pocketed the compass, his decision made. Very well, Miss Dunmach. You'll accompany us to the vault. If your brother is there, we'll confront him together. But know this, any deception, and you'll answer for it. Eliza nodded, her jaw set. I understand. When do we go? Tonight, Holmes said. The tide will be low at midnight, giving us access to the tunnels. Watson, gather your revolver and a lantern. We'll need both. As they left the boarding house, the fog thickened, cloaking Limehouse in a ghostly shroud. Holmes' mind churned through the possibilities. Caleb Dunmach, driven by a warped sense of duty, had orchestrated the Heralds' hauntings to deter intruders. The Starstone, with its alleged powers, was the prize a mineral that could sharpen the mind or shatter it. Eliza's story rang true, but her loyalty was a question mark. Was she a grieving sister seeking redemption, or a player in a deeper game? At Baker Street, Holmes prepared meticulously. He studied the compass map, committing the tunnel network to memory. The vault's location, near the Tower Bridge's northern foundation, suggested an old smuggler's route repurposed by the guild. He packed a small toolkit lockpicks, a magnifying glass, and a vial of acid for emergencies. Watson, meanwhile, checked his revolver, his face grim. The memory of the mine's cave-in lingered, and the prospect of facing the Herald in a subterranean maze did little to ease his nerves. Eliza arrived at 11 p.m., dressed in practical trousers and a dark jacket, her cloak discarded. I'm ready, she said, her voice steady. Holmes noted her resolve but remained vigilant. Trust was a luxury he rarely afforded. The trio set out, crossing London under a moonless sky. The Thames was a black ribbon, its surface rippling as the tide receded. At a derelict pier near the tower, Holmes located a rusted grate leading to the tunnels. He picked the lock with ease, and they descended into darkness. The air damp and heavy with the scent of mud and decay. The tunnels were a warren of brick and stone, their walls slick with moss. The compass glow guided them, its light steady, despite the oppressive gloom. Holmes moved with precision, his lantern casting long shadows. Watson followed, his revolver at the ready, while Eliza brought up the rear, her silence betraying her tension. After an hour of navigating twists and turns, they reached a sealed door, its surface carved with the guild's symbols, saffron flowers entwined with stars. Holmes examined the lock, a complex mechanism requiring the compass as a key. He inserted the device, and with a soft click, the door swung open, revealing a vault of staggering scale. The chamber was vast, its ceiling supported by stone arches. At its center stood a pedestal, empty save for a faint indentation where the chinned starstone might once have rested. Maps and charts lined the walls, their edges curling with age. A faint hum filled the air, like the echo of a distant machine. Caleb's been here, Eliza whispered, pointing to fresh footprints in the dust. He's moved the Starstone. Holmes knelt, examining the tracks. Recent, no more than a day old. He's close. He rose, his eyes scanning the chamber. A narrow passage led deeper into the vault, its entrance partially hidden by a fallen beam dot as they moved toward it. A figure emerged from the shadows, a man in a hooded cloak, his face obscured. The Herald. His voice was low, almost a growl. "You've gone too far, Holmes. The Starstone isn't yours to claim." Watson raised his revolver, but Holmes motioned him to stand down. "Caleb Dunmach," Holmes said calmly. "Your sister told us of your mission. You believe you're protecting the world, but your methods, hauntings, traps, suggest fear, not duty. What is the Starstone to you?" Caleb's hood fell back, revealing a gaunt face, his eyes feverish with intensity. "It's truth," he sighed. "It shows you everything past, present, future. But it breaks those too weak to bear it. The guild fell because they misused it. I won't let you repeat their mistake." Eliza stepped forward, her voice pleading. "Caleb, stop this. The Starstones destroyed our family. Let Mr. Holmes help. We can end this together." Caleb's gaze softened for a moment, then hardened. "You betrayed me, Eliza. You led them here." He drew a knife, its blade glinting in the lantern light. Holmes acted swiftly, disarming Caleb, with a precise strike to his wrist. The knife clattered to the floor, and Watson restrained him, though Caleb's strength was surprising for his frail frame. "The Starstone's not here," Caleb spat. "You'll never find it." Holmes searched him, finding a folded map tucked inside his cloak. It marked a warehouse in Wapping, not far from their current location. "You've hidden it nearby," Holmes said. "Clever, but not clever enough." Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "Caleb, why?" "We could have stopped this together." He glared at her, unrepentant. "You never understood. The Starstone's mine to guard." Holmes bound Caleb's hands with a length of rope from his toolkit. "Watson, escort Mr. Dunmach to the surface. Alert Inspector Lestrade." "Miss Dunmach, you're with me. The warehouse awaits." Watson hesitated, his concern for Holmes evident. "Be careful, Holmes. If the Starstone's as dangerous as they say, it's a mineral." "Watson, not a demon," Holmes replied, though his tone held a trace of uncertainty. "Go. We'll meet you at Baker Street." As Watson led Caleb away, Holmes and Eliza ventured deeper into the night, the map guiding them to Wapping. The warehouse was a crumbling relic, its windows boarded, its doors chained. Holmes picked the lock, and they entered a cavernous space filled with crates and shadows dot in the center. On a makeshift altar sat the Starstone, a crystal the size of a fist, glowing with an inner light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Holmes approached, his scientific curiosity warring with caution. "Extraordinary," he murmured, noting its prismatic facets. "A natural phenomenon, yet unnatural." Eliza grabbed his arm. "Don't touch it, Mr. Holmes. It's not safe." Before he could respond, a figure lunged from the darkness. Mortimer Greaves, the antiquarian, his face twisted with greed. "The Starstone's mine," he snarled, brandishing a pistol. Holmes reacted instantly, knocking the weapon from Greaves' hand with his cane. A struggle ensued, crates toppling as they grappled. Eliza seized a wooden plank, striking Greaves across the back, sending him sprawling. Holmes secured him with the remaining rope, his breath heavy. "You," Holmes said, towering over Greaves. "You've been pulling the strings. Caleb was your pawn, wasn't he?" Greaves laughed, a bitter sound. "The boy was useful unhinged, but useful. The Starstone's worth a fortune to the right buyer. I let Caleb play his Herald game, keeping fools away, while I planned to sell it." Holmes retrieved the Starstone, wrapping it carefully in his coat. "Your scheme ends here, Greaves. The authorities will deal with you." As they left the warehouse, Eliza's face was a mask of relief and sorrow. "What happens now?" she asked. "The Starstone will be studied safely," Holmes said. "Your brother will face justice, but perhaps also help. His mind may yet be salvaged." They returned to Baker Street at dawn, the Starstone locked in a safe. Watson was waiting, Lestrade already en route to collect Caleb and Greaves. Eliza sat quietly, her future uncertain but her burden lighter. Holmes lit his pipe, gazing out at the waking city. "A curious case, Watson. Not of ghosts, but of human folly. The Starstone's power lies not in its light, but in the greed and fear it inspires." Watson nodded, penning the final lines of his account. The Herald's tale was nearly done, but the vault's secrets lingered, a reminder that even in a rational world, mysteries could still cast long shadows. Chapter 8. The Vault Beneath the River. The fog clung to the Thames like a shroud, its tendrils curling over the water's surface, obscuring the distant lights of London's wharves. Sherlock Holmes stood at the edge of a narrow jetty in Wapping, his silhouette sharp against the dim glow of a single gas lamp. The Herald's compass, now with its two fragments united, rested in his gloved hand, its intricate brass workings faintly warm to the touch. Dr. John Watson, ever the steadfast companion, adjusted his overcoat against the damp chill, his eyes scanning the murky riverbank. The compass, pulsing with a subtle rhythm, pointed not to magnetic north but to a specific alignment of stars, visible only faintly through the haze above. Holmes had spent the previous night deciphering its mechanism, concluding it was a key to a hidden vault beneath the Thames, a vault tied to the Order of the Saffron Veil and the enigmatic Starstone. "Holmes," Watson murmured, his voice low, "this feels like a trap. Eliza's tale about her brother, the Herald, there's too much we don't know. And Greaves is still out there." Holmes' eyes, sharp as a hawk's, remained fixed on the compass. "A trap requires a bait, Watson, and the Starstone is bait. Worth springing for. Eliza's loyalty may be uncertain, but her brother's obsession with protecting the stone suggests he'll be here. As for Greaves, his absence is conspicuous. He's no fool. He'll show his hand when the prize is in sight." The compass needle twitched, aligning with a faint constellation glimmering through the fog. Holmes traced its direction to a crumbling stone archway half submerged in the riverbank, its keystone etched with the same gilt symbols they'd found in the Herald's Rest Tavern. A rusted iron grate barred the entrance, but Holmes, with a deft twist of a concealed lockpick, sprang it open. The grate groaned, revealing a tunnel descending into darkness, its walls slick with moss and river water. "Mind your step, Watson," Holmes said, lighting a small lantern. "The Guild built their secrets to last, but time and the Thames are unkind to stone." The tunnel sloped downward, the air growing colder and heavier with each step. The compass pulsed more insistently, its needle steady now, guiding them through a labyrinth of passages that seemed to defy the city's known geography. Watson's boots splashed in shallow puddles, and the faint drip of water echoed like a heartbeat. He clutched his revolver, its weight a small comfort against the oppressive. Silence. Holmes, how could such a place exist under London? Watson asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The guild must have had immense resources to carve this out. Not resources, Watson obsession, Holmes replied, his lantern casting long shadows across the tunnel's curved walls. The Order of the Saffron Veil believed the Starstone was more than a mineral. Their manifesto, which I glimpsed in Greaves' shop, spoke of it as a key to unveiling the mine's horizon. They built this vault to guard it, hidden from even the crowned surveyors. After what felt like hours, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness. The compass flared, its needles spinning wildly before settling on a massive stone door at the chamber's far end. Carved into the door was a celestial map, its stars mirroring the compass's alignment. Holmes traced the carvings with his fingers, his mind racing through calculations. A lock that requires the heavens themselves, he muttered. Clever. The door opens only when the compass aligns with the stars above, but the mechanism accounts for the Earth's rotation. We're fortunate the fog cleared enough to see Orion tonight. He adjusted the compass's dials, and with a low rumble, the door began to slide open, revealing a circular vault lined with shelves of ancient manuscripts, maps, and strange instruments. At the center stood a pedestal, and atop it, glowing with an otherworldly light, was the Starstone, a crystal the size of a man's fist, its facets refracting the lantern's glow into a spectrum of colors that seemed to pulse with intent. Watson stared, mesmerized. It's alive, Holmes. It feels like it's watching us. Nonsense, Watson, Holmes said, though his tone betrayed a flicker of unease. It's a mineral, albeit one with properties we don't yet understand. The Guild's journal mentioned its ability to amplify perception, perhaps through some chemical or optical effect. But it's no more alive than the coal in your hearth. Before Watson could respond, a shadow moved in the vault's periphery. A hooded figure stepped into the lantern's light, the herald, his face obscured but his posture tense, a blade glinting in his hand. His voice, low and strained, echoed off the stone walls. You've gone too far, Holmes. The Starstone isn't yours to claim. Leave now, or its curse will claim you. Holmes raised a hand, his voice calm but commanding. Your theatrics are impressive, but unnecessary. You're Eliza's brother, are you not? Driven to protect this relic from those who'd misuse it, as your ancestors did. But you're no ghost, and I'm no thief. Tell me why you guard it so fiercely. The herald hesitated, his blade lowering slightly. The Starstone isn't just power, it's madness. The guild learned that too late. My family's blood is tied to it, and I'll die before I let it fall into hands like Greaves. Watson tightened his grip on his revolver, but Holmes signaled him to stand down. Then we share a goal, Holmes said. Greaves is the true threat. Help us secure the stone, and we'll ensure it's safe from him. The herald's eyes, barely visible beneath his hood, flickered with doubt. Before he could respond, a sharp crack echoed through the vault. A dart, tipped with a glistening poison, struck the pedestal inches from the Starstone. Holmes spun, his lantern catching the glint of a crossbow in the shadows. Mortimer Greaves emerged, his gaunt face twisted with greed, flanked by two hired thugs wielding knives. Predictable. Holmes, Greaves sneered, reloading his crossbow. You led me straight to the prize. The Starstone will fetch a fortune in Vienna. There are men there who'd pay empires for its power. Holmes' eyes narrowed, calculating. You're out of your depth, Greaves. The stone's properties are unstable. Even the guild couldn't control it. You're chasing a mirage. Greaves laughed, leveling the crossbow. A mirage that'll make me rich. Step aside, or your doctor friend takes the next dart. Watson raised his revolver, but Holmes placed a hand on his arm. Patience, Watson. Greaves' confidence is his weakness. To Greaves, he said, you've miscalculated. The Herald isn't alone. As if on cue, Eliza Dunmach appeared at the vault's entrance, her face pale but resolute. She held a lantern of her own, its light revealing a second figure, her brother, now unhooded, his face gaunt but determined. Greaves, Eliza said, her voice steady, you betrayed the guild once. You won't do it again. Greaves' smile faltered, but he gestured to his thugs. Take the stone, kill them all. The vault erupted into chaos. The thugs lunged, their knives flashing. Holmes, with his characteristic agility, sidestepped one, using the man's momentum to send him crashing into a shelf of manuscripts. Watson fired a warning shot, the bullet ricocheting off the stone walls, forcing the second thug to dive for cover. The Herald, surprisingly swift, tackled Greaves, knocking the crossbow from his hands. Eliza rushed to the pedestal, shielding the Starstone with her body. Holmes, grappling with the first thug, noticed the Starstone's glow intensifying. Watson, the stone, he shouted. It's reacting to the conflict. Watson, dodging a wild swing from the second thug, glanced at the crystal. Its light pulsed faster, casting eerie shadows that seemed to writhe independently. Holmes. What's it doing? No time to theorize. Holmes replied, disarming his opponent with a precise strike to the wrist. He turned to Eliza. Can you stop it? Eliza, her hands trembling, touched the Starstone. It's amplifying emotions. Fear, anger, it feeds on them. We need to calm the room. The Herald, pinning Greaves, shouted, Eliza, use the compass. It can stabilize it. Greaves writhed, his eyes wild. You fools. You'll destroy it. Holmes, now free of his opponent, grabbed the compass from his coat and tossed it to Eliza. She aligned its dials with the celestial carvings on the pedestal, her hand steady despite the chaos. The Starstone's glow softened, its pulses slowing. The thugs, disoriented by the shifting light, hesitated, giving Watson the chance to subdue the second with a well-placed punch. Greaves, however, broke free, snatching a fallen knife and lunging for the Starstone. The Herald intercepted him, taking a shallow cut to the arm but holding Greaves back. Holmes seized the moment, tackling Greaves to the ground and binding his wrists with a cord from his pocket. The vault fell silent, save for the faint hum of the Starstone, now dim and stable. Eliza clutched the compass, her brother leaning against the pedestal, blood seeping from his wound. Watson, breathing heavily, checked the thugs, who were unconscious but alive. Holmes stood, brushing dust from his coat. Well done, Eliza. Your brother was right. The compass is the key to controlling the stone. But Greaves' involvement suggests a larger network. He mentioned Vienna. We're not done yet. Watson, tending to the Herald's wound, looked up. Holmes, this stone, it's dangerous. We can't just leave it here. Agreed, Holmes said, eyeing the crystal. But destroying it risks unknown consequences. We'll secure it for now and pursue Greaves' contacts. Eliza, your brother needs medical attention. Can you get him to safety?" Eliza nodded, helping her brother stand. "We'll go to Limehouse. There's a doctor there we trust. But what about the stone?" Holmes lifted the starstone carefully, wrapping it in a cloth. "I'll take it to Baker Street for analysis. The Guild's manifesto may hold clues to its safe containment. Watson, we'll need to move quickly. Greaves' buyers won't wait long." As they exited the vault, the compass still in Eliza's hand, the fog above the Thames seemed to thicken, as if the river itself were guarding the secrets they'd uncovered. Holmes glanced back at the stone door, now sealed once more, and felt a rare pang of uncertainty. The Starstone was no mere artifact. It was a puzzle with stakes higher than he'd anticipated. The journey back to London was tense, the Starstone's faint glow casting an eerie light through the cloth. Watson, ever practical, kept his revolver ready, while Eliza and her brother, now bandaged, sat in silence, their faces etched with the weight of their family's legacy. Holmes, lost in thought, pieced together the threads of the case. The Guild's obsession, Greaves' betrayal, the Starstone's power. Vienna loomed large in his mind, a city of intrigue where the stone's buyers likely waited. At 221B Baker Street, Holmes placed the Starstone in a locked safe, its glow muted but persistent. He turned to Watson, Eliza, and her brother. "Rest. Tonight, tomorrow, we hunt Greaves' network. The Herald's work is done, but ours is just beginning." The fog pressed against the windows, and as Watson penned notes for his chronicle, Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling like the mysteries yet to unravel. The Starstone, silent for now, held secrets that would test even his formidable mind. Chapter 9. The Chase Through London. The gas lamps of London flickered like wary sentinels as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson plunged into the labyrinthine streets, their pursuit of Mortimer Greaves a desperate race against time. The Starstone, a crystal pulsing with an otherworldly glow, was now in the hands of a man whose greed threatened to unleash its dangerous potential upon the world. The night was thick with the damp chill of late autumn, and the fog, ever London's faithful companion, swirled around them, cloaking their movements but also shielding their quarry. Holmes' sharp eyes scanned every shadow, every alley, as Watson struggled to keep pace, his breath visible in the cold air. "Faster, Watson," Holmes urged, his voice low but urgent. "Greaves is no fool. He'll head for the docks first. His contacts are there, and he'll seek a swift exit from London." Watson, clutching his revolver beneath his coat, nodded grimly. The weight of the evening's events pressed heavily upon him, the revelation of Eliza Dunmach's brother as the spectral herald, the tense standoff in the vault beneath the Thames, and Greaves' audacious theft of the Starstone. The crystal, with its reputed ability to enhance perception to the point of influencing minds, was a prize too dangerous to be left in the hands of a man like Greaves, a disgraced antiquarian whose ambitions had long outstripped his morals. There, boots echoed on the cobblestones as they turned onto Cable Street, the docks looming ahead, their silhouettes jagged against the faint glow of the Thames. The air carried the briny tang of the river, mingled with the acrid scent of coal smoke, and the distant clatter of cranes unloading cargo. Holmes slowed, his keen senses attuned to the slightest anomaly. A faint scuff of leather on stone caught his ear, and he gestured for Watson to halt. "There," Holmes whispered, pointing to a narrow alley where a flicker of movement betrayed a figure slipping into the shadows. "He's moving toward the warehouses. He's likely arranged a rendezvous with a buyer, possibly foreign. given the Starstone's value. Watson tightened his grip on his revolver. Do we confront him now, Holmes? Not yet, Holmes replied, his eyes narrowing. We need to know his destination. If he's meeting a buyer, we'll catch them both. Follow, but keep your distance. They trailed Greaves through the warren of alleys, the fog their ally and their foe. Greaves moved with purpose, his long coat flapping as he darted between crates and barrels stacked along the waterfront. Holmes' deductions were precise. Greaves was indeed heading for a specific warehouse, one known to Holmes from past cases, as a hub for illicit dealings. The building loomed ahead, its weathered timbers and rusted iron door barely visible in the gloom dot as they approached. Holmes raised a hand, signaling Watson to take cover behind a stack of crates. Greaves paused at the warehouse door, glancing around before slipping inside. The faint creak of hinges echoed in the stillness, followed by the low murmur of voices. Holmes' lips curved into a thin smile. He's not alone, Holmes murmured. This complicates matters, but it confirms my suspicions. A foreign agent, likely Prussian or Russian, given the Starstone's potential as a tool of influence. We must act swiftly, Watson, but with precision. Watson nodded, his heart pounding. What's the plan? We enter quietly, Holmes said, already moving toward a side window, its glass cracked and smeared with grime. If we can overhear their conversation, we'll know the buyer's identity and their intentions. If not, we'll improvise. With practiced ease, Holmes pried open the window, its frame groaning softly. He slipped through, landing silently on the warehouse floor, and Watson followed, less gracefully but no less determined. The interior was a cavern of shadows, lit only by a single lantern casting a feeble glow over a table where Greaves stood, facing two men. One was a burly figure with a scarred face, clearly a hired thug, while the other, dressed in a tailored suit and speaking with a clipped accent, exuded authority. The Starstone rested on the table, its faint luminescence casting eerie patterns on the walls. Holmes crouched behind a stack of crates, motioning for Watson to do the same. The suited man's voice carried clearly in the still air. You've done well, Greaves, he said, his accent unmistakably Prussian. The Starstone is precisely as described. My employers will be pleased. Name your price. Greaves, his face flushed with a mix of greed and nervousness, leaned forward. 50,000 pounds, Herr Brandt, and safe passage out of England. The crystal's worth 10 times that, and you know it. Brandt's lips curled into a cold smile. Bold, for a man who's betrayed his own. Very well. The money is yours, but the crystal leaves with me tonight. Holmes' eyes gleamed in the dim light. He leaned close to Watson, whispering, Brandt is a known operative for Prussian intelligence. The Starstone in their hands could destabilize diplomatic relations across Europe. We cannot allow it. Before Watson could respond, a floorboard creaked under his weight, the sound sharp in the quiet warehouse. Greaves spun around, his eyes wild, while Brandt's hand darted to his coat, no doubt reaching for a weapon. The thug lumbered forward, fists clenched. Holmes. Watson hissed, drawing his revolver. Stay calm, Holmes replied, already. Moving. In a fluid motion, he stepped into the light, his own pistol raised. Good evening, gentlemen. I'm afraid this transaction is at an end. Greaves' face paled, but Brandt's expression hardened. Sherlock Holmes, he said, his voice dripping with disdain. Your reputation precedes you, but you're out of your depth." "Am I?" Holmes said, his tone deceptively mild. "You're dealing with a stolen artifact of unknown power, Herr Brandt. And you, Greaves, have underestimated the consequences of your greed. Drop your weapons, both of you." The thug charged, but Holmes was faster, sidestepping and delivering a precise blow to the man's temple with the butt of his pistol. The thug crumpled, groaning, as Watson trained his revolver on Brandt, who had drawn a sleek Mauser pistol. "Enough!" Brandt snapped, his eyes flicking to the Starstone. "You cannot stop progress, Holmes. The Starstone will change the world." It will ruin it," Holmes retorted. "Watson, secure the crystal." Watson lunged for the table, but Greaves, in a desperate bid, snatched the Starstone and bolted for the door. Brandt fired, the shot grazing Watson's shoulder, but Holmes tackled Brandt to the ground, disarming him with a swift twist of the wrist. Watson, wincing but undeterred, gave chase. Pursuing Greaves into the fog-laden streets, the chase led them through the docks, Greaves weaving between warehouses and leaping over crates with surprising agility. Watson's shoulder throbbed, but his determination held firm. He caught sight of Greaves ducking into a narrow street leading toward Shadwell Basin, where the glow of gas lamps barely penetrated the fog. Watson shouted for him to stop, but Greaves only ran faster, clutching the Starstone like a lifeline. Holmes caught up, his long strides closing the distance. "He's heading for a boat," Holmes called. "He'll try to cross the Thames. We must cut him off at the basin." They sprinted toward the water's edge, where a small skiff bobbed in the current, a shadowy figure waiting at the oars. Greaves leapt aboard, shouting for the boatman to row. Holmes, without breaking stride, vaulted onto a nearby jetty and seized a coil of rope, tossing it to Watson. "Tie it to the piling," Holmes ordered, already moving to intercept the skiff. Watson secured the rope, and Holmes used it to swing across the gap, landing on the skiff's edge. The boat rocked violently, and Greaves, caught off balance, dropped the Starstone into the bottom of the boat. Holmes grappled with Greaves, pinning him against the gunwale, while the boatman, realizing the futility of resistance, abandoned ship, diving into the dark waters. Watson, ignoring the pain in his shoulder, clambered aboard, retrieving the Starstone and tucking it into his coat. Greaves, panting and defeated, slumped in Holmes' grip. "You've lost, Greaves," Holmes said coldly. "The Starstone is not yours to sell." Greaves sneered, his voice bitter. "You think you've won, Holmes? The Starstone's power will always draw men like me. You can't stop it." Holmes' eyes narrowed. "Perhaps not. But I can stop you." With Greaves subdued, they rowed the skiff back to shore, where a group of constables, alerted by Holmes' earlier message to Scotland Yard, awaited. Greaves was handcuffed and led away, his dreams of wealth and power dissolving into the fog. But Holmes' expression remained tense, his mind already turning to the next challenge. "Brandt," Holmes said, turning to Watson. "He's still at large, and his network is vast. The Starstone's allure will not end with Greaves' arrest." Watson, clutching the crystal, nodded. "What now, Holmes?" "We return to London's heart," Holmes replied. "Brandt will not give up easily. I suspect he's already planning his next move, and I wager it will be at the masquerade ball in Kensington tomorrow night. It's the perfect venue for a discreet exchange, a gathering of wealth and influence where secrets are traded as freely as champagne." The next evening, the grand ballroom of Kensington's Eldridge Manor glittered with opulence. Chandeliers cast golden light over masked revelers, their faces hidden behind elaborate disguises. Holmes, dressed in a black domino mask and tailored evening suit, moved through the crowd with the grace of a panther, his eyes scanning for Brant. Watson, his shoulder bandaged but functional, wore a simpler mask, his unease evident as he surveyed the sea of faces. "Stay close, Watson," Holmes murmured. "Brant will be here, and he'll have all eyes. Look for a man favoring his left side. He took a blow to the ribs last night." They circulated among the guests, the air thick with perfume and the hum of conversation. Holmes' deductions guided them, his mind sifting through the crowd's subtle cues, a glance too long, a gesture too deliberate. Near the grand staircase, he spotted a man in a silver mask, his posture stiff, his left hand resting lightly on his side. "There," Holmes whispered, nodding toward the figure. "Brant." They approached cautiously, blending with the dancers, swirling across the floor. Brant, unaware of their presence, moved toward a private alcove where a woman in a crimson mask awaited. Holmes recognized her instantly. Eliza Dunmach, her presence unexpected but not surprising. Her brother, the former Herald, stood nearby, his face partially concealed by a hood. "Eliza," Holmes said softly, stepping into the alcove. "I trust you have a reason for consorting with our Prussian friend." Eliza's eyes widened behind her mask, but she recovered quickly. "Holmes, Watson, I'm here to help. Brant contacted me, offering a deal to return the Starstone to my family. I couldn't refuse a chance to end this." Holmes' gaze flickered to Brant, who had frozen, his hand inching toward his coat. "Don't, Herr Brant," Holmes warned, his pistol subtly visible beneath his cloak. "Your game is over." Brant's smile was thin, almost admiring. "You're relentless, Holmes. But the Starstone is already promised. My associates are waiting." "Then they'll be disappointed," Holmes replied. He turned to Eliza's brother, whose eyes burned with a mix of guilt and resolve. "And you, Dunmach, will you redeem your family's legacy or let it fall to ruin?" The young man stepped forward, his voice steady. "I've caused enough harm. Let me help you stop him." What followed was a blur of action. Brant lunged, drawing a concealed blade, but Eliza's brother was faster, tackling him to the ground. Watson, ever reliable, restrained Brant's arms, while Holmes secured the man's wrists with a pair of cuffs produced from his pocket. The Starstone, still in Watson's possession, remained safe. Eliza approached, her expression one of gratitude and sorrow. "Thank you, Holmes. My family's curse ends tonight." Holmes nodded, his eyes softening briefly. "See that it does, Miss Dunmach. The Starstone's power is a burden no one should bear." The constables arrived, summoned by a discreet signal from Holmes, and Brant was led away, his plans thwarted. The masquerade continued, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded in its shadows. Holmes, Watson, Eliza, and her brother slipped out into the night, the Starstone secure in a locked case. Holmes carried Dot as they walked through Kensington's quiet streets. Holmes spoke, his voice reflective. "Greed, Watson, is a predictable vice. It drove Greaves to betrayal, Brant to ambition, and nearly tore the Dunmach family apart. Yet it's also what makes men like them so easy to outwit." Watson smiled faintly, the pain in his shoulder easing with the night's success. "And what of the Starstone, Holmes? What becomes of it?" Holmes glanced at the case in his hand. It will be studied, not exploited. I've arranged for it to be entrusted to the Royal Society under strict conditions. Knowledge must serve. Truth, not power." Eliza and her brother exchanged a look, their relief palpable. "We'll rebuild," Eliza said. "No more secrets. No more heralds." Holmes inclined his head, a rare gesture of respect. A wise choice. The fog had begun to lift, revealing the first stars above London's skyline. Watson felt a surge of hope, the weight of the past days falling away. The city, with all its mysteries and dangers, seemed a little brighter, its shadows less daunting. Holmes, ever the enigma, walked ahead, his mind already turning to the next puzzle, the next chase. But for now, the case of the Forgotten Herald was drawing to a close, and Watson allowed himself to believe, if only for a moment, that London might enjoy a brief respite from its ghosts. Chapter 10. The Herald's Rest. The fog that had clung to London streets for weeks seemed to part as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson stepped out of their hansom cab, the familiar silhouette of 221B Baker Street looming ahead. The case of the Forgotten Herald had drawn to a close, yet its echoes lingered in their minds like the faint toll of a distant bell. The Starstone, that curious crystal pulsing with an otherworldly light, had been secured, and Mortimer Greaves, the orchestrator of the spectral ruse, now languished in a cell, his ambitions thwarted. But for Holmes, the resolution of a case was never merely the capture of a culprit. It was the unraveling of every thread, the illumination of every shadow. And so, as they approached the Herald's Rest Tavern one final time, there was a sense of completion, but also of quiet reflection. The tavern stood at the edge of Whitechapel, its sagging roof and weathered signboard unchanged since their first visit. The air was crisp, the late autumn chill biting at their fingertips as they crossed the cobblestone street. Watson adjusted his scarf, his breath visible in the evening air, while Holmes, ever impervious to discomfort, strode forward with his usual purposeful gait. The tavern's windows were dark, no longer flickering with the eerie glow that had fueled rumors of the Forgotten Herald. The locals, once wary of the place, had begun to pass it without a second glance, the ghost story fading into the city's vast tapestry of tailies inside. The Herald's Rest was silent, save for the creak of the floorboards beneath their boots. The air smelled of old wood and stale ale, but the oppressive weight that had once filled the space was gone. Holmes paused near the bar, his sharp eyes scanning the walls where the guild symbols had been etched. The scratches remained, but they seemed less ominous now, mere relics of a forgotten order rather than portents of doom. Watson, ever the chronicler, pulled out his notebook, his pen scratching softly as he began to record their final visit. "It's remarkable, Holmes," Watson said, glancing up. "This place feels ordinary now. No wails, no shadows. Just a tavern." Holmes' lips twitched in a faint smile. The ordinary, Watson, is often the mask worn by the extraordinary. This tavern was never haunted, but it was a stagia. Carefully crafted one. The question remains, have we uncovered every player? Watson frowned, closing his notebook. Greaves is in custody. The Starstone is safe, and Eliza and her brother are free of their family's curse. What more could there be? Holmes did not answer immediately. He moved to the far wall, where a faded painting of a ship at sea hung. Crookedly, with a deft motion, he lifted it from its hook, revealing a small recess in the plaster. Inside was a folded piece of parchment, yellowed with age but intact. Holmes unfolded it carefully, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the contents. "A final piece of the puzzle," he murmured, passing it to Watson. The parchment was a letter, written in the same elegant script as the one that had first drawn them to the tavern. It bore no signature, only a single line. "The Herald's work is never done, for truth is a flame that burns eternal." Below, it was a crude sketch of the Herald's compass, its needle pointing to a symbol Watson recognized from the cryptan. 8-pointed star. Another riddle? Watson asked, his voice tinged with exasperation. "I thought we'd put this to rest." Holmes' eyes gleamed with that familiar spark of curiosity. "Not a riddle, Watson, but a reminder. The Order of the Saffron Veil may be dissolved, but its ideals, its obsession with hidden truths persist. This letter suggests someone else may yet guard the Guild's legacy." Watson sighed, tucking the parchment into his pocket. "Then, we're not done?" Holmes clapped a hand on his friend's shoulder. "For now, we are. But the world is full of secrets, and we are its seekers. Come, let us return to Baker Street. There's a fire waiting, and I've a mind to revisit that journal from the mine." They left the tavern, the door creaking shut behind them. The fog had lifted entirely, revealing a sky speckled with stars. Watson glanced up, wondering if the Herald's compass, wherever it was, still pointed to those distant lights. Holmes, as if reading his thoughts, remarked, "The stars, Watson, are indifferent to our struggles. Yet they guide us all the same." Back at 221B Baker Street, the familiar clutter of Holmes' rooms enveloped them. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm shadows across the walls lined with books and chemical apparatus. Mrs. Hudson had left a tray of tea and biscuits, which Watson gratefully accepted, pouring a cup for himself and offering one to Holmes, who waved it away, already engrossed in the journal from the Cornish mine. The Starstone, now locked in a steel box entrusted to the Royal Scientific Society, was no longer their concern, but its implications weighed heavily on Holmes' mind. He sat in his armchair, the journal open on his lap, its pages filled with the meticulous notes of the Guild's final expedition. The Starstone, described as a mineral that sharpened the mind to unseen truths, had driven the Order of the Saffron Veil to both greatness and ruin. Its discovery on the Isle of Dunmach had promised enlightenment, but instead it had sown discord, with members turning on one another in their quest to control it. The journal's author, one Elias Dunmach, Eliza's ancestor, had warned of its dangers, urging the Guild to destroy it. Yet the Starstone had survived, hidden away until Greaves' greed brought it to light. Holmes traced a finger over a diagram of the Starstone, its crystalline structure rendered in precise ink. "A remarkable substance," he said, almost to himself. Not supernatural, as the Guild believed, but scientific. Its properties suggest a rare form of luminescence, perhaps amplified by the mineral's unique composition. I suspect it affects the brain's perception, creating visions or heightened awareness. Watson, sipping his tea, raised an eyebrow. "Visions? You mean like the Herald itself?" "Precisely," Holmes replied. "The Guild's members, exposed to the Starstone, may have experienced hallucinations, interpreting them as omens or spectral figures. Greaves, cunning as he was, used this to his advantage, crafting the Forgotten Herald to scare away the curious while he sought the crystal for himself." Watson set his cup down, leaning forward. "But Eliza's brother, how did he become?" The Herald? Was he under the Starstone's influence? Holmes nodded. The journal suggests prolonged exposure could destabilize the mind. Young Dunmach, raised on tales of his family's legacy, likely found the Starstone's fragments in the crypt or the mine. His visions, combined with his desire to protect the guild's secrets, drove him to assume the Herald's mantle. Eliza, unaware of the full extent of his actions, sought to protect him, even as she aided us. Watson shook his head, marveling at the complexity of it all. And Greaves? He wasn't mad, just greedy. Greed is its own form of madness, Holmes said, closing the journal. Greaves saw the Starstone as a means to power, a tool to manipulate minds. His connections to foreign agents suggest he intended to sell it to the highest bidder, regardless of the consequences. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. Watson leaned back, his thoughts drifting to Eliza and her brother, now free but forever marked by their family's past. What will become of them? He asked. Holmes steepled his fingers, gazing into the flames. Eliza is resourceful, and her brother, with proper care, may recover. They've chosen to leave London to start anew somewhere far from the guild's shadow. I've recommended a physician in Edinburgh who specializes in disorders of the mind. Beyond that, their path is their own. Watson nodded, satisfied but still troubled by the letter they'd found at the tavern. And this? He asked, pulling the parchment from his pocket. This talk of eternal flames and hidden truths, it suggests the guild's reach extends beyond Greaves, beyond even the Dunmachs. Holmes took the parchment, studying it anew. Indeed, the Order of the Saffron. Vale was vast in its day, with members across Europe. This letter could be the work of a remnant, someone still loyal to the guild's ideals. Or it could be a challenge, meant to draw us into another game. Watson groaned. Another game? Holmes, we've only just finished this one. Holmes chuckled, a rare sound that warmed the room more than the fire. Rest easy, Watson. For now the game is over. But should another player emerge, we shall be ready. The conversation turned to lighter matters, Mrs. Hudson's excellent biscuits, the state of Watson's medical practice, and Holmes' latest experiment involving the properties of tobacco ash. Yet the case of the Forgotten Herald lingered, its details etched into Watson's memory as he began to write. His pen moved swiftly, capturing the fog-shrouded tavern, the wind-swept cliffs of Dunmach, the cryptic symbols, and the Starstone's eerie glow. He wrote of Holmes' relentless logic, of Eliza's courage, and of the Herald himself, a figure born of both madness and loyalty. As the hours passed, the fire burned low, and Holmes retreated to his violin, coaxing a soft, melancholic tune from its strings. Watson paused his writing, listening to the music blend with the distant sounds of London carriage wheels, the call of a night watchman, the pulse of a city that never truly slept. The case had been a labyrinth, but they had emerged, as they always did, with the truth in hand. The next morning, Holmes was up early, his energy undiminished. He stood by the window, pipe in hand, watching the street below as vendors set up their stalls and children darted through the crowd. Watson joined him, still bleary-eyed from his late-night writing. "You're planning something," Watson said, noting the glint in Holmes' eye. Holmes exhaled a plume of smoke, his expression inscrutable. "Merely observing, Watson. The world moves on, and so must we. But I've a mind to visit the Royal Scientific Society today." The Starstone's properties warrant further study, and I'd rather ensure it remains in safe hands." Watson raised an eyebrow. "You don't trust them?" "I trust no one," Holmes said lightly, but there was a weight to his words. "The Starstone is a curiosity, but also a danger. Its allure could tempt others as it did Greaves. Better to keep it under scrutiny than buried in a vault." They set out after breakfast, the streets of London bustling with life. The Royal Scientific Society's headquarters, a grand building near Bloomsbury, was a hive of activity, with scholars and scientists hurrying through its marble halls. Holmes and Watson were ushered into a private study where the Starstone rested in its steel box, locked behind a glass case. Dr. Evelyn Harrow, a chemist and one of Holmes' occasional correspondents, greeted them warmly. "Mr. Holmes." "Dr. Watson," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "The Starstone is unlike anything we've studied. Its luminescence is stable, yet it responds to certain wavelengths of light in ways we can't yet explain. We've isolated the mineral you mentioned, corundum, laced with an unknown trace element." Holmes leaned closer to the case, his reflection distorted in the glass. "And its effects on the human mind?" Harrow hesitated. "We've conducted no human trials, of course, but animal studies suggest heightened neural activity. Rats exposed to its light showed increased problem-solving ability, but also agitation. It's unsettling." Holmes nodded, his suspicions confirmed. "I recommend strict containment, Dr. Harrow. This is not a substance to be trifled with." "Agreed," she said, making a note. "We've already restricted access. Only a handful of us even know it's here." As they left the society, Watson couldn't shake a sense of unease. "Do you think we've truly seen the last of it, Holmes? The Starstone, the Guild, all of it?" Holmes paused on the steps, his gaze distant. "Nothing is ever truly gone, Watson. The Guild's secrets, like the Starstone, are buried but not dead. We've closed one chapter, but others may yet be written." They walked on, the city unfolding around them. The case had tested them, drawn them from the fog of London to the wild cliffs of Dunmach, from smugglers' coves to hidden vaults. It had revealed the fragility of the human mind, the allure of power, and the enduring pull of truth. For Holmes, it was another triumph, another not untangled. For Watson, it was a story, one he would refine and publish. Though he knew some details, the lingering questions would remain between them. Days turned to weeks, and life at 221B Baker Street resumed its rhythm. Holmes took on smaller cases, a stolen heirloom, a blackmail scheme, while Watson tended to his patients and his manuscripts. Eliza Dunmach sent a letter from Edinburgh, thanking them and reporting that her brother was improving under the care of Holmes' recommended physician. The Heralds' Rest Tavern was sold to a brewer, who planned to restore it as a public house free of its ghostly reputation. One evening, as winter settled over London, Holmes and Watson sat by the fire, the familiar comfort of their rooms a stark contrast to the perils of the case. Holmes was reading a treatise on mineralogy, while Watson proofread his account of the Forgotten Herald. The silence was companionable, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the occasional turn of a page. "Watson," Holmes said suddenly, setting his book aside. "Do you believe in ghosts?" Watson looked up, surprised. "After all this?" "No, I don't. You proved the Herald was no spirit, just a man caught in a web of his own making." Holmes nodded, but his eyes were distant. and yet the idea persists. The ghost of the Forgotten Herald was a fiction, but it was born of something. Real fear, guilt, the weight of the past. Perhaps that's the true specter we chase in every case. Watson considered this, his pen still in hand. You're saying we're all haunted in a way? Precisely, Holmes said, a rare softness in his voice. By our choices, our secrets, our desires. The trick is to face them, to drag them into the light. Watson smiled, returning to his manuscript. Then I suppose we'll keep chasing ghosts, you and I. Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling toward the ceiling. Indeed, Watson, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Outside, the fog had returned, softer now, a gentle veil over the city. The stars were hidden, but Holmes knew they were there, guiding the way as surely as the Herald's compass. The case of the Forgotten Herald was closed, its mysteries solved, its players at rest. But London, with its endless secrets, would always call, and Sherlock Holmes would always answer. The fire burned low, and Watson's pen scratched on, preserving the tale for posterity. The Herald's rest was quiet, the Starstone safe, and the truth, as always, had prevailed.